All right. Thanks, everyone. We're going to call this meeting to order tonight. We got a few people still kind of shuffling in, but we're going to move forward doing our business. We do have a few items on the agenda that might change here a little bit, and I'll get to that in a little bit, but so Katie is not with us tonight. She became a mother here recently, so congratulations. She did come in and help set up the food, but she's got other duties, and I'm happy to know that she's got a healthy little baby boy with her there right now, so.
And I think a round of applause for the new mom. You wouldn't stand those.
And I know Grandpa's not here, but Mr. Mike Camblin is the new grandpa because this is his grandbaby. So I wish he was here so we can congratulate him too. So it's always exciting. So so we do have a little bit of wonkiness with that, but please bear with us and we'll do our best to get to the agenda and move through. So but we're moving forward. So Steve, Katie, I believe Katie is online, but Steve and Katie have talked, and Steve's going to do roll call for the Basin Roundtable membership. If you're online, we'll give you a few moments. Please raise your hand or let us know you're here. And then we'll go around the room and do introductions, and then we'll do introductions on there as well after doing roll call to make sure we got a quick forum here. So, Steve.
Okay, I'm gonna go right down the order that were listed on the website on. So Sonia Macy's.
Here.
Tom Gray. Here. Doug Overton.
Here.
Oops. Julie Baxter.
Here.
Stephen Hinkmeyer, I'm here. Alden Vandenbrink.
Here.
Ken Brenner. Here. Mike Camblin. John Welder. Jay Sheehan. Tim Winkler. Casey Green.
I'm here.
Rebecca Breesmore.
Here.
Kelly Hendrickson.
He's here.
Okay. Madison Muxworthy.
Here.
Will Myers. Ken Vertrees. Frank Alpone.
Here.
Rich Thompson. Jeff Myers. Doug Monger.
Here.
Jeff Comstock.
Yes.
Doug Davis.
Present.
Chuck Whiteman.
Here.
Chris Collins.
Present.
Jennifer Holloway.
I'm here.
Travis Day. Bill Banaraka. Vince Wilczek.
Here.
T. Wright Dickinson.
Here's that.
Pat O'Toole. Jonathan Bowler.
Here.
Oh, Jackie.
Here. I'm here.
Hey, sorry, Jackie.
Everyone?
That's everyone.
Okay, so we do have a quorum at least, so now I'm gonna go around and I'll start on this side. And we'll just do introductions, who you represent, things like that. And then we'll want to go online as well, now that we know we got a quorum, we can move forward, so. I'm Alden Vandenbrink, Chair, but also the Rio Blanco County Municipal Representative to the Basin Roundtable.
I'm Jeff Myers. I'm an at-large representative on the roundtable and a supposedly retired rancher from southwestern Mount County.
I'm Madison Muxworthy. I am the environmental representative on the Basin Roundtable.
I'm Steve Hinkmeyer. I'm Moffett County Municipalities Rep.
Ken Brenner with the Upper Yampa Conservancy District, and also along with Jeff, one of your ICC members.
Rebecca Breesmore with the Colorado River District out of Glenwood.
I don't think Rebecca was on the roll call, were you?
Yeah.
Okay, I just missed it, sorry.
Jonathan Dollar with the Savory Wilson River Water Conservancy District.
The recreational representative.
Frank Alcone, the domestic water provider rep, also sit on the grass committee.
Lisa Brown with Wilson Water Group.
Eddie Mercino, natural resources for Rio Blanco County. Doug Overton, for my county commission.
Kelly Scritchfield for White River District Conservation Districts and this house in.
Is that weird to say?
It was. Didn't notice this morning, I forgot to.
Since will we got argument.
Doug Davis at large,
Jeff Comstock at large.
Bob Ray, Moffett County Representative.
Are they maintaining Spratt County Commissioner?
Chris Collins at large, Rancher and White River.
Julie Baxter, Route County Municipalities. Jenny Fritzen, Friends of the Yampa.
Patrick Stangle from the Agricultural Alliance.
How about online? Steve, do you got the list there available?
So I have a phone number. 629-3073.
Russ Sam, CWCB.
Oh, all right.
Okay. So I've got Zane Kessler with the Colorado Water Conservation District.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Got Garrett, no last name.
Yeah, it's Garrett Eller, Civil Design Consultants. Thanks.
Where that could be his last
Whiteman at large.
They keep moving on me, but I think a lot of these, Robert Sakata.
Hi, guys. Thank you.
Shane Mullane, Colorado Sun. Shannon Mullane, sorry. Shannon, if you're trying to talk to us, you're muted. I think that's it.
That's it.
I think that's it. The rest of the,
Okay, thank
the
you.
rest of them are us.
For those online, when we go through our discussion, and you, if you want to participate, please raise your hand. We will pick on the base roundtable members first to give them priority, but if there's time available, we will look for those outside the base roundtable to provide input to should they choose. If you're online, please remain on mute until you are called or until you have to speak. So that just helps expedite. Folks in the room here, we do have an owl. Most of you are aware of them now. But speak towards the owl if you could, please. That dramatically helps those online to kind of just understand what we're communicating there. So. So with the agenda, a couple of items just that I have on there. Zane Kessler was not able, as you see, he's not able to be here in person, but he will be visiting with us online. So that is a little bit of a change. And then we're going to have a discussion that I think Zane, the IBCC, Ken and Jeff will be participating in. And I believe Jackie might want to jump in, but we're going to have a conversation that we've got talking about the drought task force. I would like to kind of keep that conversation if we can, since there's so much I've been approached about that being a topic for tonight to kind of visit with. I think it's great that we're visiting with about it. But when we get to item C, CI, C1, the first one there, that might be the most appropriate time for us to really kind of dive into that drought task force. And I encourage, Jackie, Zane, and our IVCC and Big River folks to kind of make that an open discussion, if you would. I think it'd be much more valuable to us as a group, rather than trying to scatter it out. So that's all I had on the agenda. It's not really a change, it's just organizing the conversations a bit better. So. Otherwise, we're looking for approval to approve or modify the agenda.
Second.
Got a motion by Frank, second by Steve Hinkmeyer to approve the agenda. Discussion. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, say nay. Next item. Review and approve the May 10 minutes. Any additional questions on there?
Minutes.
Second, thank you. Got a motion, a second on the table. Any other further discussion? Online, anybody? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Excellent.
For recording, can you say who, moved or?
Chris made a motion. Steve made a second.
Thank you.
Sorry. Public comment, anybody online or in the room that would like to have public comment? Yes.
I don't know if this is the right time to say this, but, I feel like it would be great to have our meeting packet, and I know that everyone worked so hard to like put all of the materials in the meeting packet, but to have it done a little bit earlier. I think it's really tough, especially if it's like the day of, the meeting to be reviewing it. So I think if we could standardize that, I think it would be awesome.
That's been moved forward as
Okay.
well, yes,
Awesome.
but thank you.
Excellent suggestion.
Yeah. And I will be one that we are still breaking in a new.
Yeah.
With that, had a baby. So
Yeah,
and those
no,
are things that we take into consideration, but
Yeah.
I know we've been pushing the wire here, but it's just how. But we're striving to do that,
Yeah.
yes. Thank you for bringing that up. So, thank you guys.
And she's sitting right next to me when she says,
Anybody else?
So just to remind everybody, the meeting packets are, all information for the coming meeting is on the website. If you go to the website, scroll down to the meeting dates, you can find the meeting packet information. It'll take you right to the Google Drive, where we'll have it by the month, and you open that month up for the meeting. You should have whatever information we have at the time would be hopefully in that drive.
Correct. Jeff, you walked in very timely.
Yeah, right on time.
Yeah,
Maybe a little tardy. Sorry.
yeah. So Jeff, you can start out, but then Jackie, I was hoping that you would kind of fill in with that CWCB spot with item 6 as well, if you would, please.
Okay, I'm gonna let Jeff go first.
Did you want to share something, Jeff? Yeah. Is that all right? Yep. Where it's at. All right. So, not a ton to update you all on this cycle, but, just wanted to throw out a few reminders, and then wanted to talk about the draft C9 summit agenda. Were you planning on talking about that during the IBCD update? Well, I'll just touch on it and we can get back to it if you want to, so first things first, got a couple funding deadlines coming up. August 1st, there's a WSRF deadline, as well as our non-reimbursable investment projects. There's an August 1st deadline for that as well. If you're not familiar with what those projects are, those are statewide investments for regional supply needs. Those are typically. But I just didn't work.
Somebody needs to mute.
Not even in there. So yeah, those are our NRI projects. Those projects are on the projects bill. So this August 1st deadline is for the 2024 projects bill. And those, are projects that typically don't fall within other CWCD grant programs in the range of $1 to $10 million. We haven't done maybe the best job of advertising that program, but it is on our website, and I just wanted to call your attention to that. If you do have, those types of projects, like the board approved $1 million for the CASM program through the NRI program. So those types of things. If you're interested, all the information's on the CWC website. I'm happy to point you in the right direction as well. Also just wanted to let you know that the annual WSRF allocations will be available after the September board meeting. So you'll see that reflected on the basin balance sheet, probably around October 2nd or that first week of October. And you all did a great job spending a bunch of money in a short amount of time, so you'll be getting your full annual allocation. A couple other things related to funding. The turf replacement program cycle 2 is open now until the end of August. We expect that this cycle 2 to be extremely competitive just due to budget limitations and the number of projects that came in during the first cycle and indicated they were likely to apply in cycle 2 as well. So if you're interested in that program, or have an entity that might be interested in something for that HB 1151 program, get in touch with Jenna Batson as early as possible. The sooner the better, just so she's the program manager for that, and she'll be able to give more details on what it's looking like and applications and all that stuff. Couple more things related to funding: the Wildfire Ready Watersheds program and the Technical Assistance and Local Capacity program. Those are both accepting applications through the CWCB portal on a rolling basis. They are tied to ARPA funds that the state received, so they need to be contracted by December of 2024 and spent entirely by December of 2026. The update for the technical assistance program is that CWCB contractor is finally under contract. And so you can apply for those funds, on a rolling basis, and we're taking applications. Reminder that those technical assistance and local capacity funds are for federal grant applications, so to assist with any federal grant applications. Let's see here. Oh, I skipped ahead, sorry. A couple more things. So the climate change in Colorado report is expected to be finalized here in the next couple months, probably released in late 2023. We're thinking like September or something around there, but that is an update to the 2014 report and focuses on the newest kind of climate science and a synthesis of relevant climate science for water management in Colorado. Like I said, this update to the 2014 report, and this really focuses on comparing new climate models with the old ones from both the 2008 and 2014 report. There's also some new interactive web-based tools coming online. I'll drop the link for their website in the chat when I'm done here, but there isn't much up there right now, but there's a few things, and for those of you communicating that stuff to boards or the public, there's some really cool tools that are coming online for that. I also just wanted to, I didn't see her online, but she might be there. We have a new water planning and climate impact specialist who just started a week or so ago. Her name is Emily Adrid. She'll be working pretty closely with me in the roundtables, especially as we kind of lead up into the tech update and things like that. So she'll be coming to some of these roundtable meetings here in the near future. And I just encourage any of you who work in the climate science realm to reach out to her and introduce yourself. To be really helpful. Let's see. Okay, so I think that's really all I had to update you all on. One thing that I just realized I didn't mention is we're working on a summary document for the drought summit that we held back May, beginning of June. We have posted all the recordings for the sessions online, and I'll drop a link to that webpage here in the chat as well, but I know a lot of folks were really interested in coming and we had a lot of demand for seats in there, so we made all the recordings available. They're basically broken out by session, so it's not like an 8-hour Zoom video that you have to watch. You can watch it in chunks, but a lot of great sessions there, talking about trust and, just different impacts of drought across sectors and things like that. So I encourage you to take a look at that when you get a chance, if you're interested. And then on that note, we showed the IBCC this draft C9 summit agenda in June. If you all recall, a few months back, you took a survey, or a lot of you took a survey, just kind of telling us what types of agenda items you like to see at events like this, what topics do you want to cover, and things like that. So based on those survey results, we were working with the IBCC PEPO subcommittee and created this draft agenda. So we're trying to get one last round of roundtable feedback before we try to finalize this agenda by the end of the month. So we can do that now. You can give me some kind of off the cuff live feedback if you like. I'll take notes. You can also send me an email if you want like more detailed, feedback, like, hey, it'd be great to talk about this specific aspect of drought resilience, or this specific challenge we see here at the roundtable when we're talking about funding and getting all these great funding opportunities, or something like that. But so the black at the top are things that are already in the queue, pretty finalized. These are things that we've been working on, as well as just, some things that we'd love to workshop with the roundtable membership and the board and IBCC and things like that. The next category, the green, are the topics that fell out in like the highest ranked topics from the survey results. And then the next two in the blue are ones that ranked really highly, but didn't quite cross that threshold into the top ranked ones and kind of fell out in that second group of topics. Among those topics were like ag innovations, supporting next generation of water meters, like those types of things. So that we know from experience that in a one-day event, we have space for about 10 or 11 agenda items, depending on what they look like, whether they're workshops or, lecture style or seminar style stuff. So that's kind of what we're shooting for. That being said, these are all pretty broad. And so we will likely work in kind of all the different action areas in the water plan into most of these topics, if not all of them. If that makes sense. So just because, ag isn't listed here, we'll likely pull that into conversations about drought resilience or climate change or funding or even water conservation, stuff like that. And, folding in vibrant communities and other things like that too. So I think that's all I had to update you all on. I can just pause here for some feedback if you want. We are trying to finalize this by the end of the month. So if you want to send me an email, do that by the end of the month. Yeah.
Kelly.
Just real quickly, in the watershed health piece, I like that piece. And I would like to incorporate forest health in there as much as possible.
Yeah, so that's a really great point. And typically we list that as forest / watershed health. Just kind of condensed it down to make it more readable on screen and more digestible. But I think those are things that we would be talking about: forest health, post and pre-fire stuff, stream restoration stuff, all of the things. It's kind of all encompassing watershed health stuff. Yeah.
Anyone online? Covered it all, man. Thanks for your time.
Great.
Oh, yes, Ken.
The C9 summit was also intended just to be an opportunity to cross-pollinate with other roundtables. How many of you have gone to a roundtable meeting from another basin? Couple of us, well, yeah, that doesn't. But I think you can see from the show of hands, not many. There's been a few of us, but you know, it's an opportunity. I mean, we assume that they're working just as hard as we are. And that they feel just as strongly about what they're doing as we do about what we're doing. So there's gotta be a chance to learn from them. So that's one of the main reasons that we wanted to host this, and it's kind of that underlying theme that you don't see written here, but it's the reason that we wanted to hold this event. So when you attend, I'm assuming you're all going to attend, please keep that in mind, that this is a chance to interact with other roundtables. We're still working on the logistics and the fine points about how we're going to set it up, but that's certainly when we reviewed this with the IBCC members in early June, that was clearly the indication that we got, was that they wanted to see us have that. And I remember one of the comments that really struck me was, you know, we don't need a lot of lectures. You got a room full of water experts. They don't need lectures on water. We need chances to talk to each other and hear from each other about how to respond to these opportunities and the challenges that we have. So this is all fairly fluid. There's going to be a lot of water under the bridge, so to speak, between now and then. But your feedback and your input is important to make sure that we do a really good job and that we can maybe make this an annual event. Thank you. That's all.
I think the last one was several years ago.
19, I think.
Yeah, and that was well attended. There was a huge number.
I haven't tried that part.
So, yeah, I was amazed at how many roundtablers showed up. So that room was packed. So glad to hear this is moving forward. So. Jackie?
Hello, can you hear me?
Very much so. Thank you for joining us, Jackie.
You're welcome. Thanks for allowing me to join hybrid style. Couple things from me, and thanks for the update. CWCB staff has been working really hard, so thank you for that. A couple things. So you all probably saw the news that Becky is full-time Colorado River Commissioner for the state of Colorado. And the difference between that position and what she was serving in before is that this is now a paid position focused 100% on the Colorado River and the negotiations taking place now, and all of the different issues that we're dealing with as a state on the Colorado River, whereas before that was an appointed position that was unpaid. And while Becky was serving in it, she also had the dual role of being the director of the Colorado Water Conservation Board. And so she will focus only on Colorado River issues and communicating, those issues back to the state through the channels that are, provided to her through CWCB and the Commissioner's Corner and DNR, and which means that we will be hiring, the CWCB will be hiring a new executive director. So that search has begun, and we'll stay tuned for who that new hire will be in the coming months. Any questions on that?
Process,
Sorry?
your process that you're using for hiring, is there a selection committee, or is there are you just taking interviews, and how are you doing this?
The state has a process for job applications, and then it's a pretty tight timeline. So the board was asked if anybody could participate in the selection of who will be interviewed from the applicants. And so it was over the 4th of July holiday. I participated in the reading of those applications, and my top 3 choices for an interview, and I'm not sure who else did. So I haven't heard the report back from that. And I'm not totally positive what the interview process looks like, only that I have volunteered to be part of it. But, you know, it all goes through the HR department. So I'm not really privy to what is happening other than my volunteering for it.
Thanks for doing that.
Yeah, for sure. As you all know, and I know many of you participated in the Big River Committee earlier, the SEIS, the Supplemental Environmental Impact Statement, is alive and well, going through the second, its second iteration. I believe that there's a link to what that is on the Roundtable website, but if not, we can provide you with that link. So the state has been busy looking at that SEIS and compiling comments for that. I don't know anything else about that. I imagine that, well, I know for sure that we will hear an update on that during our board meeting in Crested Butte next week. So, sometimes our meetings are just a little tricky because I don't have much to say until after I hear from the board. And then by the time I come back to you guys, it's 2 months outdated. And so I'm sorry for that, but it is what it is. So yeah, that's happening. And if there's any questions on that, I probably can't answer them, but I can certainly try or get an answer later. Seeing none. The other thing that I think is pretty interesting, worth noting regarding what the board has been up to, is that the state hired a consulting firm to interview all the board members, and we're really trying to, and actually I know that Roundtable members were interviewed as well on just how the Colorado Water Conservation Board is operating. What our purpose is, are we serving our mission well? What could make it go smoother? What ideas are out there? And this can be anything from like process to issues that we tackle, all of course needing to be within our statutory authorities. But I had my interview with the gentleman who is conducting those about probably a little bit over a month ago now. And I found it to be, really insightful, just the questions that he asked me. He gave me some questions ahead of time to think about. And then we sort of, just went rogue and had some discussion on how things were going, and, just kind of off the wall sort of conversation. And so we will hear from, his name's Greg. We'll hear from him at our board meeting this coming week. Just what the results compiled of those interviews are. And I don't exactly know what the next steps will be there, but I think, one of the cool things about it is, we have a new director that will come on board, and then we have this operational plan that we're going to be doing as part of the water plan that we just released. We have annual operation planning where we can, as a board, determine a focus for the year. The board that put that into the water plan, which was a little different than it is right now because we've had some turnover, was really excited about this opportunity to kind of narrow in on what should be the focus on an annual basis, when we know that over a 10-year period, we have all of the things that are in the water plan, but what can we do that is a little bit more meeting the moment on an annual time frame. And so we're going to talk about that at this meeting too. And so I think those kind of three things happening right now is a really healthy period for the board itself to be in as an agency. And I look forward to seeing what kind of comes out of that, and how we move forward. So I thought I would share that with you, and happy to ask you or answer any questions that you might have on that as well. Okay, That's my update.
Oh, okay. Last call, if anybody has any to interact with Jackie. Thank you very much for your input. Always appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Jackie.
Hey, Aaron, I didn't hear Aaron earlier. I don't know if Aaron's
She's on that. She's on now.
Aaron's there. Okay, so we're gonna move to item 7. Aaron?
Yes, Al, thank you. I did join a little late, and I'm going to be very brief. Just some updates on a few items that I've been updating you on here consistently for a while. Measurement rules, we have entered into stipulations with 4 of the 7 protesters. Again, you know, keeping in mind that trial is set for late February of 2024. Our hope is again to be able to stipulate with all the protesters. And we specifically have been very actively involved in working with 2 of those remaining 3 protesters. But again, our goal would be that we ultimately do not have to go to trial with these rules. Next, as far as abandonment, it continues. It goes on for a while. As you guys know, we started our process of evaluating water rights for abandonment back in early 2020, and then of course started following the statutory timeframe. And yep, we just still have several outstanding protests that haven't been resolved, but we have resolved quite a few, which have been a mix of people withdrawing their protests to people going ahead and saying and conceding and having their water right abandoned, to a mix, some abandoned, some not, to full removal of the water right from the abandonment list. So we continue to work with those. I think right now my recollection is we have 3 or 4 abandonment protest case set for trial. But hopefully, again, the goal is that we ultimately won't go to trial in any of those cases. And then just last, I just thought I'd let you know, obviously, good water year, we don't have a lot of calls on any systems. We do have 2 calls. Our 2 always standard calls that we almost always have is Talamanias Creek and Bear River. And the Bear River's actually been on call for quite some time, about a month and a half. With that, Al, that's all I'm going to mention. If there's anything else people are wondering about, I'm happy to answer those questions, but otherwise that's all I have to update people on.
I have one, and I know we've got another river within the Piance Creek. Is that still under free conditions?
It's under free. Yep. Piance Creek is not on call, which is amazing, but great.
Yeah, the amount of water that we've noticed coming down there is pretty substantial, because some years you get just a trickle and other years you get a couple 100,000 acre feet coming out of that thing. And I think this is one of them. So,
Absolutely. Yep.
good. I don't know if those folks can have ample water supply. Ken?
What's the progress you've made on your new staff members?
Oh, yes. Thank you, Ken. Kind of like Jackie mentioned, some things are just an HR process. We have presumably our budget manager is sending all of our what's called position descriptions to HR, and then HR has to review those position descriptions before we can actually post them. So we're kind of in this HR limbo right now of getting the position descriptions to them and approved before we can actually advertise them. So more delayed than I would hope, but I'm hopeful and I have a pretty good positive attitude that we're going to start moving pretty quickly on these. With any luck, it would really surprise me if we don't have these positions posted for hiring by the end of the month.
Anyone else online? Thank you, Aaron.
All right, thank you.
Moving on, Patrick and Ken, a PEPO update.
Patrick has got our grant application submitted by the June 1st deadline. I believe the entire 25,000 available has been requested. It's falls into 2 main categories again, one under administration support for the roundtable and for the work that Patrick does for us. The rest are for some projects, some videos, and some additional support for the canopies that we want to use for our public outreach at special events. We're still working on that calendar. We're always interested to hear back from you on, if you have something that you want to have that canopy up for, an existing event. Remember the whole concept behind the canopies was, you know, instead of us trying to host an event and attract people to come to see what's going on and hear about water, go where people already are, to parades, to fairs, to special events that we host in our communities. So that's available. It's a resource that you have. Please take advantage of it. We will reimburse you. I think it's $50 if you'll come and pick up the canopy and take it to your location and use it. They're great looking canopies. We're working on the rest of the materials that we want to have. I'm sure that we have some additional materials out there somewhere in the state that has not yet arrived, but we'll be happy to distribute to people that stop by the canopy. But that's something that we're getting better at. We're just getting started on this project. This will be going on for years to come. Patrick, what else did I forget?
That's about it. All right, so we'll send an email out, looking for event dates where the canopy should be at and work on trying to get the sign up sheet better.
Anyone have anything for Ken or Patrick? Online? Thank you, gentlemen. I'm going to turn the keys back over to Ken and now to Jeff for the Big River Committee.
Okay, do. Thanks. Couple of topics for you today. The first is a little bit on the state of the river conversation, including the supplemental environmental impact statement that Jackie made reference to. We had a good discussion today in the Big River Committee meeting itself, and Emily Zemak from CWCB staff was on. That helped kind of, I think, give us a little bit of guidance there. Then we're going to tackle the conversation about the programmatic biological opinion for the White River, which is a component of the White River Management Plan. So that's sort of the idea. With respect to the river, I'm going to just start, but this is an open discussion. So please feel free, Tom, Ken, or anyone else, Jackie, to jump in. Just as a reminder, we talked about this last time. The draft supplemental environmental impact statement, which is required to change the record of decision for the 2007 interim guidelines, was released in April. That was rescinded recently because the lower basin states, Nevada, Arizona, and California, reached an agreement and requested that the Bureau of Reclamation rescind the draft SEIS and add their plan as another alternative. The Bureau agreed at least to rescind the document. Now, whether or not the new document specifically includes the lower basin's plan is unknown, but there's some evidence that it's going at least towards that direction. Just a reminder, the original SEIS said one of the action items or one of the alternatives is don't do anything, leave the 2007 guidelines in place. And then there were two which called for very significant reductions in lower basin usage from 13 to 28%. One of those alternatives said we're going to distribute those reductions based on priority, the law, and the other said, no, we'll just do it evenly across the board. Remember that? So that's what the original SEIS that was rescinded said, and there was no recommended alternative among those three. Now, the lower basin agreement there's still a lot of detail missing about that. But I sent you out an email, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I want to recap that, but correct one misstatement. Okay, so the lower basin agreement calls for reductions of 1.5 million acre feet over the first 2 years of its implementation. So the first unknown is, does that mean water year 2023, or does it mean not till 2024? We're not clear on that. I kind of think it's the latter because it's a 3-year deal and it supposedly ends in 2026. So the first difference between that and the FCIS is that those reductions were to have immediate effect. So they would have taken place in 2023. These reductions, it's not completely clear, but it's likely would not start until 2024. 1.5 million acre feet, 750,000 acre feet a year. You can do the math. If the lower basin were adhering to their 7.5 million acre feet entitlement, that would be about a 10% reduction. So it's already less than the 13 to 28%. The truth is, of course, they're using a lot more than 7.5 million acre feet. So the reduction in fact is not that nominal 10% one. It's more like 8% of what they're really using. It is to be compensated. Somehow, the people who reduce will be paid from funds from the Inflation Reduction Act. Everybody wants to dip into to the tune of $1.2 billion those first 2 years. Finally, then they will take a total of another 1.5 million acre feet out of their usage through to 2026. Here's the part I goofed up when I emailed you after our last conversation. There is no plan, no part of their plan in which they account for transportation and evaporative loss. I misunderstood what Andy Muller from River District said. It's just a hearing defect problem. So this plan does not include any change in the way those things are accounted for. Now, Rebecca's getting ready to jump in here. There are reasons why, of course, the main thing is California doesn't want to do that. Recall that in the 7-state agreement, Nevada and Arizona agreed to change the accounting for those losses. California held out. You want to add anything to that, Rebecca?
No, I mean, I think where we're seeing, this, this plan from the lower basin, and it is a step in the right direction. We have some cautious optimism with it. However, it's not a permanent reduction, it's temporary 3-year reduction, so we really like this. That's kind of our stance on.
Okay, all right, so it's our understanding, although again, we don't know the details and I don't know this, but from talking with several different people, first of all, Bureau of Reclamation does intend to add this plan or something like this plan as an alternative in the next iteration of the SEIS. And that, we don't know when that's coming out, but it's going to have to be soon, this year. And we also understand that they are basing their current water year negotiations on a plan similar to this one. So that sort of tells us that the Bureau of Rec, at least at some level, is kind of accepting the lower basin's proposal. Now, there could still be pushback. There are many, many unknowns. That's Jeff speculating. It's not, there's no real factual evidence.
Hey, Jeff, just to let you know, too, Zane has his hand up. He may be able to provide some.
Oh, yeah,
additional
good.
insight that
I didn't hear.
Zane.
Zane's question. I can't see that online, so help me out with that.
Zane, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I'm going to back up to just follow up on Rebecca's comments. I was just going to add that, the numbers you have here are all correct, but put that in the context of what the commissioner's original call was 2 to 4 million acre feet per year to address the structural deficit. If at best we get 3 million acre feet between now and 2026, and you cut that 2 to 4 million acre foot structural deficit right in the middle, say it's 3 million acre feet per year that we need, this is still a long way from a meaningful fix on the Big River. And as Rebecca mentioned, I think it's long been our belief, and it's been stated by the state and the UCRC and most others in the upper basin, that any meaningful fix on the Big River is going to have to include permanent reductions of use by the lower basin. And so, again, just doubling down on what Rebecca said, there is reason for optimism here. It's a step in the right direction, but it certainly shouldn't be seen as an effort that will bring the river into balance.
I agree completely, Zane. Thanks for that context. there's a note there at the very bottom. This is a 3-year plan. It's not a proposed permanent reduction in their usage. So it falls, as Zane just got done telling us, it falls very far short of what we were hoping for and in fact, what we think the river needs. Okay. Questions or comments about that? Yes, Sonny, go ahead.
Am I getting the math wrong on this? Because I'm trying to figure out how we're doing 1.5 million acre feet. Did you say over 3 years? And then our total is 3 million acre feet?
Yeah, so it's 1.5 million for the first 2 years and then 1.5 million in that third year. To total 3 million for the 3 years. Does that make sense?
Well, is it 1.5 and 1.53?
So, I'm sorry, so
If the first 1.5 is over 2 years.
it's over 2 years. So that's,
So I see.
and now total is 3, right? And as I think, not to put too fine a point on it, but as Zane pointed out, what the original SEIS was calling for was 2 to 4 million a year.
Right, right.
So obviously, this proposal, not to mention the $1.2 billion price tag, falls pretty far short. Yeah, Ken.
And, you know, while we probably all enjoyed skiing on a lot of extra snow and seeing a lot of extra snowpack on your hay fields and floating down the river with a little bit more water between you and the rocks, it probably did more harm than good from the standpoint of these negotiations. It gave them some breathing room they didn't really deserve, and unfortunately, I don't think we gained any ground on that. You know, that's probably part of the reason that you're seeing the proposal that you've got is they were at 350% of average in their basin, probably closer to 200% in Utah and here. So it just gave them a little bit of breathing room that unfortunately doesn't really, I think, push forward the negotiations. But we can only be hopeful.
Frank, go ahead.
2 questions. First question, is there no compensation for this agreement in the 3rd year? That's the first question. And then the second question, what is the status of this agreement for a review process with the Bureau? Where is it at in that standpoint?
Okay, I only know the answer to the first one. They are only proposing compensation for the first 2 years. In terms of where the Bureau is now in evaluating that, I do not know. Jackie Zane may be able to help us more there. You know, if we just imagine that we're going to live with the 2007 guidelines for water year 2023, and in October, the new contract amounts had to be set. If you look for something like a 60-day review period and acceptance, and then some time for implementation, October, September, August, it really means the new SEIS has to come out like next month, maybe, right? Middle of next month to the end of next month. I think that's when we'll know how much of this plan becomes an actual alternative in the revised SEIS. That's where I am kind of doing the math, but somebody with more knowledge. Zane, do you want to jump on that?
You know, that's a little bit outside of my expertise, but I think that's consistent with my general understanding.
Okay. Other questions or discussion about this? Okay, let's get to the easy part then. That was me being facetious, sorry. You may recall last meeting 2 months ago, David Graff from Fish and Wildlife Fish Recovery Program gave a good overview presentation, actually more than an overview, kind of a detailed talk about the White River Management Plan. And in it, he described for us kind of the implications of going forward with a programmatic biological opinion on the White River. which has to do with defining conditions to sustain the 4 endangered species fish in the white. That's why it's biological. Of course, when you have a PBO, it has implications far beyond fish, right? Because it defines activities, projects and depletions in the river. And we're going to get a little bit more detail on that from Rebecca in just a bit. After that meeting, Al called me and said, you know, we were getting some feeling that some of the intergovernmental agencies that would have to sign off on the PBO as a component of the White River Management Plan feel like it might not be in their interest to move forward with the PBO part. So he asked the Big River Committee to look into that and draft a letter of support, because more or less unanimously, the White River members of this roundtable think we should move forward with the PBO. We did that. We discussed it at some length in today's Big River Committee meeting, and we're gonna recap that and have that discussion at the roundtable level now. Before we do, 2 quick points. First of all, if you think about the Wolf Creek Reservoir and its impact on the river and everything that has to go into that planning, leave that out of your thinking about the current PBO, because that thing is so significant, it would require its own treatment. So it's not a part of whether the White River Management Plan PBO moves forward at this point. Okay, Wolf Creek is not on the table. Secondly, the PBO is a technical thing, and it defines technical parameters. I hope that tonight we can have our conversation about whether or not we should move forward with the PBO on the White River, and not so much about what that PBO ought to say or do, because that's a hard conversation. There's a lot of detail. There's just information missing for this group that we don't know that. So with that said, I'm going to hand it off to Rebecca to give us a little bit of background on the PBO itself and the process. If you don't know the process and you don't understand the PBO, you are not alone. So fire away, ask any questions that you need to. And at the end of that time, there is a draft letter of support in your packet. We can talk about that if the roundtable discussion seems to lead us in that way. Okay, with that, Rebecca, hit it.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to keep it pretty broad and general, because it's a pretty complex thing. There is a 2-page document in the packet on page 7 and 8, it looks like, with some FAQs, explaining that PBO a little bit more, but essentially, the White River planning team has been working for a pretty long time now, approximately a decade, on the White River Management Plan, which is a document that's made with this planning team, but by the Upper Colorado Endangered Fish Recovery Program to protect and recover endangered fish species in the White River. So that plan is going through the finalization processes. And right now, the next step, potential next step, is to go through the programmatic biological opinion or PBO. Without a PBO, that management plan is a guidance document. It has management action, flow recommendations, all kinds of other things for protecting those fish. But a PBO would make that document, would have a cooperative agreement signed by parties involved in the planning team, and would make that document an accountable action plan of things that have to happen to protect fish. The other component of what that PBO would do is that it would provide protections for water users by essentially creating an augmentation source of water, so that people with water projects over 100 acre feet don't have to go through an individual Endangered Species Act Section 7 consultation to get their project approved. So having a PBO is like an umbrella that basically says, okay, you have this water project, the PBO has already gone through Section 7 consultation, and we have water to mitigate your impacts over here on your project. Without a PBO, water users are going to have to go through that Section 7 consultation on their own. So that's a really quick breakdown of what that is. We do have, there's PDOs on the Yampa, on the Gunnison, the Colorado, so this is like a new thing for the state. And so it basically provides protections for both water users for ESA compliance and also protections for fish. Right now, the discussion happening with the planning team, they're set to make a decision in August, but it's essentially a split between different groups on whether to do that PDO and go after that now or to wait. The reason that stakeholder groups are saying to wait is they're saying we've only had 3 different water projects in the past 10 years who would need it to go through this Section 7 consultation. So why would we go through all of the work of a PDO, which is pretty heavy lift to create that? Why would we go through that work when we've only had 3 projects in the past 10 years that could have benefited? The other side of that is that it does provide basin equity with 3 other basins having those protections for water users on the western slope. Some of those stakeholders are saying we need this so that White River water users and the fish there also have protections. And then it also, provides that ESA compliance, and it makes it a much quicker turnaround for getting things approved and certainty for getting things approved. I think I covered that. Is there any other parts that I missed, Callie, or? That was a really quick breakdown. Yeah.
I have a couple of questions. So the first question is on your last, what happens if there's not a PDO? The planning team plans to execute management plan, which means nothing really. Is that basically like best management practices for the river? Since it's not, I just don't know.
That's a good question. So essentially, really kind of the meat of that management plan document is a table of recommended actions that different stakeholder groups can take to help fish species in the White River. Without a PDO, that's a guidance document, and it's like, here are great things to do. And I think there is a significant emphasis on planning team members really do want to complete those whether or not there's a PDO. But if there is a PDO in place, all those stakeholder groups sign a cooperative agreement that says we are doing these things and we're going to move forward. So they're held accountable for making those actions happen. And those actions aren't always, like providing upstream storage for fish. It can be things like letting sediment out of any reservoir and stuff like that. Removing invasive fish species. There's all kinds of different actions in that plan.
So with the PDO, it just makes different agencies accountable for, if they said that they're going to do this, we're in this, the PDO signed, and we have a management plan. If they execute it, then those government agencies they have to follow through with those now.
Yep, and the reason is because you have to do it because you're allowing these water users, to not go through section 7 consultation. And they're getting faster approval of projects because they don't have to mitigate those environmental impacts these government agencies mitigate environmental.
And my second question was, I have a limited knowledge on section 7.
Yeah.
But with the PDO or the management plan, how either one or both or separately, how excluding the section 7 stuff, how is this going to impact any potential future water rights or anything like that?
That's a tough question.
I mean, if we have a PDO, is it really going to allow the White River, it's going to limit the development on the river and allow the White River to be more of a natural free flowing river as best as we can or have now? Or is the process going to take longer or stuff like that?
So I think I understand your question. And essentially a PDO is going to help people who want to have water depletions in the sense that it's going to make that process for getting approval a lot easier and quicker. Because you don't have to go through that Endangered Species Act, process to make sure you're not harming fish. Is that?
Well, just in general, like a basic, someone wants to get a junior water right, let's just say it's municipalities, or let's say it's industry, someone wants to get a junior water right for for hauling water or something like that. Does that, with the PBO, does that impact their ability to do that? To apply for that water rights, specific water right?
No,
Okay, but it hinder it or
no, it shouldn't, it should only
it
make it.
still does the same process with the state,
Oh, in terms of water, yeah. It will be the same process going through water, et cetera.
Sonia, before we go to you, we have Doug raising his hand here. Doug Munger, you want to hit it?
Yeah, so if I could, I guess this is a mystery problem here. We don't know who's got a problem with the PBO process. And again, I hate delving into the problems of the White River. I mean, Callie Hendrickson talked about it earlier. I mean, we've had a PBO since, probably 1980. I'm concerned about why or why not. And I'm very concerned about implementing my will upon the roundtable to direct the White River people and the rest. I realize this is a guiding document, but so for us in the Route County, I mean, and the Yampa-White, the Yampa, I mean, it was an automatic allowance for a depletion allowance. So that was the benefit of this thing. I mean, so and based on the numbers that you heard from Rebecca, I mean, you didn't have to go through this stuff to get in to do a little water project. Otherwise, you're subjecting everybody to do this thing to get their little water right or whatever potentially. So that, we got forced into it, and I think we went in bucking and kicking and striking and the rest. So I think in the long run, from my experience, and I would have to ask Director Sharp, my Upper Yampa Director Sharp, I mean, he's so experienced in all of this. He was there when we did the Yampa PBO, but it really gave allowances to these smaller things that would have to go through a process that was so time consuming and overexert, it's just, and so the bottom line also is, and I thought I heard Callie say this today at the Big River Committee. Well, so why did not the White have one and the Yampa and the Green has one and the rest? Well, because we got forced into it earlier because of all these uses that we were having coming up. I think it's just now or later. I think we need to buck up and I think you guys need to buck up and figure out how to have this thing happen and get what you want out of it for your future development and the automatic allowances that are going to be passed through. So anyhow, that was my ranting and raving for tonight. Thank you very much.
Okay, he says it's the last, but of course it isn't. Sonia, go ahead.
Always a pleasure to follow Doug. Great job of explaining what is a very complex concept. I'm more familiar with the multi-species habitat conservation plan, which is a similar model but it's land-based. So I guess my question to you about this one is, what's the duration or life cycle of the PBO?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah, this is.
Could you just reiterate that question real quick?
Yeah, so the question was, what's the lifespan of the PBO? It may depend on the PBO. I'm not as familiar with the other ones.
They're all different.
They're
all different. So the emphasis is 20 years, it ends in 2026. And that's because the Colorado River District leased U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service water out of Elkhead until 2026. So they would have to come back in and look to see if how the fish have recovered. And I think they're kind of doing that now, but it's essentially a 20-year. The Yampa, but it could, I guess, be extended.
So is that pretty standard? I mean, across 20 years, is that a long duration, standard duration, or we don't really know?
Each one's independent. I think the one they're looking at, the White would be a phased approach, and between the phases, it would be like a 10-year threshold. If we don't have your depletions done, then it gets readdressed. If there is something that the depletions are met, then in that 10-year period, that depletion allowance, then you institute the next part of it. The Colorado River, I think, is on a 10-year, and there might be a 5-year something with that attached as well. I'm sorry, I don't. These are very big documents as well, but each one is independent based upon what they see for the specific basin.
Yeah, and how they expect to recover the species. That's the key to the way.
Okay, Jeff, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna chime into this discussion. During the Big River Committee today, we got bogged down in maybe the details of what the PBO would look like for the White River. And afterward, we all, I think, standing around the hallway talking about it, realized that that's not really the job of the roundtable, is to get those details worked out. That is White River Basin's job to figure out what those numbers, what the magic numbers are for them and how much they need to grow. But the take home point for me out of that was White River needs the same opportunity the rest of us have had. They need a PBO. We ought to be supporting them. The locals are asking for it. I'm in full support of moving forward with supporting them moving forward on a PBO. As far as the whole terms and all that stuff, I will admit that was a direction we shouldn't even have talking about because it's kind of outside our wheelhouse, but count me in for a yes. I think we ought to act on it today.
Okay, well said.
And I think that's.
Steve, I'm sorry.
That's appropriate as well, because those negotiations have taken place in our White River Basin. That's how we came up with that, those list of depletions. That was negotiated with water users in the White River Basin.
And just a quick thing to add on to that, I will say that having a White River PBO is part of the roundtable based implementation plan and the priority items. But this isn't coming out of nowhere. This is something.
No necessarily.
No, oh, is it? I'm sorry.
It's stream management plan and PBO.
Okay,
So the stream management plan is definitely in.
okay,
And PBO was added because I guess the assumption was that they're gonna find that the fish need some sort of recovery
okay.
and that they need a PBO. So it's definitely a stream management plan.
Yeah.
And potentially a PBO.
Now, PBO, finalizing of that was a tier 1 project within one of the projects of our list for the BIP.
The stream management plan and PBO.
I believe the PBO was independent,
No,
What's
not on my list.
but I know it was a tier 1 project.
Yeah.
A tier 1 project.
It's stream management plan and PBO.
Okay,
Good question.
having said that, Chris Moore, go ahead, that's fine.
Real quick, I just want to.
That's fine.
I'm sorry. I have not had a chance to review the draft letter that we have in here. I am supportive of the White River PBO. I think it's going to allow our river to have more of a natural river system. That's just my opinion. I'm a little bit surprised. We had David Graff come out to one of our meetings a couple of years ago in the Middle Reach. I mean, they love the White River, before this because it is natural river. There's, our return flows are excellent. What we're doing, how we, they love the upper White River. How it translates down to lower river, I'm not really so sure on that one yet, but I just want to say I'm supporting of the PBO, and I did not mean to interrupt you, so it's okay.
A letter. Yes, go ahead.
Would go to who and would have any power?
Okay, so I can answer the second question. Yeah. The letter in the packet is addressed to David Graff.
Okay.
And he's the head of the fish recovery thing. I think that makes sense, and it's also was the target of the Colorado River District's letter. They sent it also to David. We got to, butter him up a little bit by saying, thanks for coming to our roundtable, giving us the talk. The letter should be in your packet if you want to read it. It's there. Does it have influence? It's us supporting our White River colleagues. I mean, that's what it is. Yeah. So, yeah, Steve, another comment, go ahead.
Okay, I just have a comment. So if you look at page 8 of this 2-page document that's in our notes, I'll just read you the part of the first paragraph. At this time, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Recovery Program does not wish to pursue a PBO, given that the White River is not in need of flow augmentation, as current conditions have been reported to be good for endangered and threatened species. I've been dealing with permitting in the state of Colorado for 40 years, and I can tell you, I have never raised my hand and said, I wish you guys would regulate more. Because they're not saying, there's whatever's in the stream management plan, so if it's me saying, well, I want PBO, so they're gonna analyze good conditions. And they don't have a way to recover them or they don't need a way to recover them with flow augmentation, which is what a PBO is all about. I mean, they're still gonna do all of the other things that CPW and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, they're all on the hook for, catching pike and doing whatever. There's just no flow augmentations, and that's what the Yampa PBO covered. Stuff in the Yampa Basin was like I worked at Trapper Mine. If we did 100-acre catch pond to recover sediment, so it didn't leave the mine site, well, we paid a fee. If I remember right, it's about $1,000 per acre foot. And we paid into the wildlife recovery program that probably what they're using to lease water from Elkhead for. So if we ask them to do that, I'm not sure what we're asking them to look at, because the PBO is really essentially, how do I augment flows? And I don't know who put this together. Rebecca, is this from the River District?
I did put it together, yeah.
Okay, so if they're saying there's no flow augmentation, I don't know how they're gonna analyze, I don't know how they're gonna analyze that we need more flow, because they're already saying they don't need it.
But look at it from the opposite. If they're saying, if the Fish and Wildlife Service says those endangered fish need additional protections, let's pretend there's less abundance of a certain species of fish in the river. That right there hamstrings the entire community from growing. They don't get to develop water if the Fish and Wildlife Service uses that. At least if there's an opportunity up front to negotiate future development, like 100-acre ponds.
So
it exists in that PBO. That'll be grandfathered in versus making everybody have.
So in the stream management plan right now, they've made allowances for 6,150 acre feet of non-ag depletions and 3,500 acres of future ag depletions. That's what's built into their stream management plan now.
So you're meaning the White River Management Plan?
Yes.
Rather than stream management plan?
Yeah, into
I just want to make sure we were talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
My line versus the other one.
Yeah.
And so that, I don't disagree with you there, but if I understand it right, nothing holds their feet to the fire on that until we have a PBO. Through the White River Management Plan, what I'm hearing people say is voluntarily, this is what it will be. You have a PBO, then that's what we will have. And our guys, and like, as Jeff's example, if we have great years like this, for the next 10 years, life is good. Everybody's telling us we're not gonna have, okay? And so in the next 10 years, if it goes back to like we were the last 5, I believe there will be people looking at doing private reservoirs to try to have water to irrigate for a little ways. And there's a number of them in the county already anyway.
Yeah.
I think we'll be looking at either new ones and or enlarging those. If this PBO would allow them to make that happen without having to go through a section 10 consultation. 10 is the wolf, sorry. Then I think that's what we need to have. I mean, I get there's all kinds of opportunities here. I want to help our producers and towns or whoever else not have to go through that process if the PBO will allow that. That's what we need to have in the advisor.
But do we know that? I think the danger that I see is, I don't think any of us know enough to be absolutely certain what is going to come out of this process. Are you sure that it isn't going to somehow come back in the end and be more of a hindrance for your development in the future than where they have you today? I mean, that's my big question.
I flat out disagree with that, because the PBO has not had one project, if there's a PBO in place, not get completed, not one. If you don't have a PBO, some projects have not been completed.
All I'm saying is, oh, you guys be careful what you're wishing for. If this is what you want, and you can't be coming back in a few years saying, oh my God, look what happened.
I understand that, and I guess from a water resource manager, when I look at water development, I look at a community, look at what we got for individuals coming in here having to go through the red tape to get base roundtable money. They turn around and run away, so no development happens. We've seen that here on a roundtable. This is another piece. This streamlines the ability for people to utilize water without having to go through all this red tape to get it. It's done. They write a little letter, they submit it to them. Here you go, you're approved, go forward. They don't have to hire an attorney. They don't have to hire an engineer to go through all this planning efforts. You want a rancher in the White River that has a hard time trying to get a diversion structure permit or installed or a flow measurement device? Well, now let's try and get additional storage within a basin for these agricultural users to put that 3,500 acres of new ag beneficial use. They're not going to do it because it's going to be too complicated. The PBO streamlines that process so that these water users can put that water to beneficial use without having to go through all the government bureaucracy.
Okay.
Just
Go ahead.
think about it like an MS4 permit. I mean, it's a blanket opportunity to freeze a moment in time and put into place the actual actions that are needed to maintain or enhance without, as Jeff was mentioning, running against the threat of regulations coming down and changing the game for everybody. So I'm supportive. I think it's a proactive maneuver and sounds like the people of the White River want it. So I don't know why we would object. I mean, I personally think that the letter is well written and it sounds like, is there anybody in the White River Basin who objects to signing on to the letter?
And as to the risk, I would just add, that's an excellent point. And as to the risk, Ken, I would just add, it's the White River constituents who have to work through that. They have to make the PBO happen and it has to fit their river and keep it healthy. So that's the task at hand, right? I mean, it's their risk. If there's no PBO, you could argue that they don't have the opportunity to have that conversation.
And I guess I would just say the one thing that I want to make sure is that the PBO in that process would not put an in-stream flow requirement in for the fish. So, I mean, it's an augmentation plan, if I understand right, but not an in-stream flow per se. Is that is that accurate?
There is not an in-stream flow in those management plans.
There are flow, like in the Yampa one, we have like 3 levels of flow based upon.
So do you.
Yeah.
But I heard you say that they're reasonable. You were able to have those conversations until they were reasonable. I mean, the bottom line, I mean, they're endangered fish.
Did you say that? Reasonable?
Yeah.
The bottom line is with the endangered, because we do have the endangered fish there. If we get low enough, because they are endangered fish, I mean, they're gonna get water to them one way or another. So without the PBO, right, I guess my right terminology here. From what I understand, we are in a better position than if we don't have. And I, don't get me wrong, I mean, it sounds weird to be supporting and.
The White River asking for more regulation is not, I don't do this more regulation.
I don't either.
I don't either.
It's a protection from future regulation, really.
It's a guarantee of a way to develop the future. I said it 20-some years ago on this was these PBOs were talking in the Yampa, and we had the same discussions and the fear, well, Doug said it well, that we came in kicking and screaming and fighting. And in the end, we realized we secured ourselves a future versus putting ourselves at risk of the Endangered Species Act.
Yeah, but we didn't really have a choice.
With the PBO as well, just say we get to phase 2, you utilize your 16,650 acre feet of depletions. What they do is then they go back and renegotiate that so that your community and your river basin continue development, but also with considerations for the protections of those endangered species without stopping. Without a PBO, there's a point in there to where they will flat out say, you're done, you're not going anywhere, your fish are out. So,
Rio Blanco County supports this. And ask for your support, and with that, I'm gonna make a motion to support it. So the letter.
Okay, hang on. We're gonna take a second for that, but before we do, Maddie had her hand up first, so let's let Maddie.
And Paul, yeah.
You've got a motion on the floor in a second, so now you can have your discussion.
Go ahead.
go ahead.
I kind of brought up a really good idea in our Big River Committee meeting. I have heard that this is a very contentious, decision, and I feel like I do not personally have enough information to vote on this either way. And so I feel like it would be really great to get the perspectives from people that have been working on this management plan. And I know people in this room have been working on it, and that's great. But I think from both sides of the perspective, we need to hear that conversation. Why certain people think that it should be done and why it shouldn't be done. And so if we could have like a special meeting or something to talk about it, I think that would be a good way to move forward.
Okay,
I thought David Graff explained that fairly clearly when he was here on why they didn't want to move forward with it.
yeah,
And because that was part of his presentation and was asked, why don't they want to do it? And he explained that, and he's the stream coordinator for the recovery program, and he spoke on behalf of those that were not necessarily even for this.
you know, Al, I'm with you, but it was 9:15. We had a long meeting. I don't think I remember the specifics of why he said that. So hang on, one point of order. There's a motion on the floor. Can we get a second? Sonia seconded, okay. Now we can continue this discussion. Sonia, Maddie is proposing a more detailed conversation. Callie, go ahead.
I guess. I'll change what I was gonna say.
That usually happens to me after Mungo talks.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah, I guess we can talk about it more and more. Sounds like August 1st is when we have a timeline.
The first week, it's around the first week of August, yeah.
1st of August, we're in the middle of July.
So we've got
We
a
have
couple
time
weeks,
to do
yeah.
that Or not, I will tell you. To my knowledge, most of the White River is supportive of it. I would be in support of the motion that's on.
Okay. Okay,
And-
Tom.
and-
I'm sorry, Julie, go ahead.
No, well, I think Rio Blanco County has asked for our support. I think us trying to dig into the details and see if they're gonna do it right. Or whether there's gonna be. Whatever your viewpoint is, specifics in there is not our business. I think our business is to. Give a letter of support as to Ken ask is have any power, probably not, but it's a moral support. And let White River set their own future as they see that they have enough opposition, they won't do it in Rio Blanco County. So I think we should just go ahead and give a letter of support. This worked good for us. There's 2 other basins that's worked good for the Colorado Basin. Let's move on.
All right, Jules.
Well, I agree with, that was gonna be my question to Callie. It was just, Rio Blanco County supports it and carries. How do you know that is it just word of mouth, or have there been like meetings? How do we know that the constituents in the White River support
So
it?
you're sitting next to one of my board members right there. And that's pretty much what I run with. And so I was just trying to think what our land use plan, I don't know if it speaks. This, I think so. We've had some conversations for the last 3 or 4 years about it
I think we.
at the board meetings. I mean, the conservation districts have not held public meetings on it, to answer your question. Okay. White River.
But we brought it
White
up,
River people.
brought it up in our long-term plan.
Yep.
We address this, in our long-term plan, with the county and the district, so I mean, that's something we've incorporated, that's based on conversations, that's all of us have had with our neighbors and stuff like that. But I probably moving forward, I think it's going to benefit the entire community to have some more in-depth meetings as to really what this is. Because I think there's a lot of people that will go with it, and there's people that are adamantly opposed to it, especially when somebody brings up in-stream flows. That's gonna be adamantly opposed to it. So I think, as we move forward with this, and like I said, I'm supportive of this. And I think there's a lot of people support there, but we need to have some, and that's for us to do. It's for us to figure out how do we educate ourselves.
Okay, before we go to Alvin, Chuck Whiteman has his hand up. Chuck through Zoom, go ahead.
Yeah, one thing that I don't understand is, well, particularly the Yampa and the Colorado River, when they had their PBOs, I believe you had the LCAD and you had Rudi and you had augmentation water available. Where that's one thing the White River does not have is a augmentation source. And so I'd wonder how that would work with the PBO. Now, I understand that the large augmentation coming along, that would be a PBO of itself, but I don't know exactly how, with us not having any augmentation water, how would that work for the smaller projects?
Rebecca, do you want to put that?
Yeah, I don't know that I have a really good answer to this, because I literally just got added on to this a couple months ago. It's not only augmentation water, right? So there is additional protections that they can do. We've talked about it a little bit just in terms of like removing invasive species, swing sediment kind of stuff. Al, do you have any, do you know the like action?
I think Lisa's offering to help you out a little bit.
She made modeling for it.
I did. I think the idea is that it's a depletion account, so basically, or a depletion allowance. To say we're basically gonna do accounting that says, all right, Jeff's new project is 100 acre-feet of depletions. Julie's new project is 200 acre-feet of depletions, and we're allowed to have, this is not the real number, but we're allowed to have 1,000 acre-feet of depletions. Okay, we're at 300, so we've got 700 more acre-feet of depletions left. Before we think that the flows in the river are gonna drop low enough that the fish become negatively impacted. And that was then part of the programmatic biological opinion, was that the Fish and Wildlife Service, biological services, was going to evaluate if the flow recommendations that incorporated the depletions would still be sufficient for the fisheries.
That's my
Yeah, so it's not wet water, it's accounting water.
Excellent, that's an excellent description. So further comments were Chris, one more time.
One last question.
Yeah, we've heard that before.
Okay, for me, this is one last question. So, will this allow, would a PBO allow us to streamline, let's say, a Lake Avery expansion? If it is, if it's used for augmentation or stuff like that.
So it depends on how much it is, right? Because since it's accounting for those depletions, it depends what the depletion is.
Or how big the depletion
It
is.
helps us. But it would, depending on the size of it, it would allow us to, to expand that reservoir. As we have talked amongst us in the river for expansion for, just general water quality. Obviously, we've got a great year this year, but in the last couple of years, temperatures and flows have been high. So we've had Lake Avery releases, and we've always wanted to have larger Lake Avery releases, but we're handcuffed by, what the CPW at least in there, able to do, so, but that potential is there.
If it was within a certain depletion.
I'm gonna wrap this up here.
Yeah, I think we're good.
And I have one more piece, but I want privilege if I can. Okay.
All right.
I've got 10 years plus into this baby.
Okay.
Okay. I guess public outreach, this is a public record of decision that the federal government would have to do to finalize a PBO. There would be an enormous amount of public outreach and public meetings throughout the White River Basin, including some in Utah. That would be part of this, because this would be from the confluence of the Green all the way to the headwaters of the White. This PBO would not be just for the Colorado side, it would also be for the Utah side. So the outreach has been significant. I've been part of this now for 10 years. Our Rio Blanco Water Conservancy District is a key stakeholder at the table for the endangered species to finalize a PBO in the White River until this is finalized. That's what it says within our coordination that we're doing with this. My board, Mr. Vince Wilczek, Tim Winkler, myself as the general manager have been working proactively with that and sharing this with our public. It's spooky to them, just like it's spooky to you, where I look at you being more knowledgeable people, but now how do we educate that? That's the recovery program's job to do, should they choose to go this route. But it's possible, and it's been successful all over the place. So, and I'm not getting a lot of negative public pushback other than get those people out of the river from shocking our river. Because that's the only actions they do today. And that is one method. A PBO is to get them to do other things so they're not in that river every day of the week, shocking the catfish, knocking down our recreation fishery that we got, which is real. There's other things that they can do to enhance our abilities, even to recreate the White River, which is very difficult right now. So with that, we're at a point to call the question.
We have a motion to call the question, but this isn't exactly the democratic or the parliamentarian process, but Madison had asked to make one comment before Al busted in. So last comment, and then we're going to call the question. Go ahead.
I'm gonna abstain from voting.
Maddie feels okay.
As am I, because I'm a stakeholder in our Rio Blanco Water Conservancy District. I imagine Director Wilczek of Rio Blanco Water Conservancy District would abstain from a vote as well.
Okay, all right. The motion on the floor is for the Yampa-White-Green Basin Roundtable to send a letter of support, which is in your packet, to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Fish Recovery Group in the name of David Graff. It's moved and seconded. We've had a good discussion. All in favor, raise your hand. $14 in favor.
And online.
Oh, I'm sorry, online. Doug? Jennifer, that's 16.
Chuck?
I'll be in favor. Chuck's in favor.
So 17 of the 21 voting members and 17 of the 21 voting members.
Okay.
One abstain or 3 abstain.
Okay, fair enough. 17 out of 21. Very well then, I'd say the motion carries. Thanks for your discussion. That was well
Still
done.
need to call NATO.
Yeah, you need to
We
call
do
the
need
name
to call
because
the
we
nation.
need to, we
All right.
need to record.
Still need to do that.
You want to call it?
All opposed,
Oh, I'm sorry.
we need to do that as well.
Yeah. Opposed, please say nay. Or raise your hand if you'd like. So we have abstentions. Okay, thanks very much. All right. With that, I'm going to hand this agenda back to Al. Or do you want to talk about the task force now?
I think that's where we're at. We're still under your,
Okay. All right.
That's IDCC, so
Right.
now we'll hand it back to you.
All right. Ken sent you by email a very detailed report on the last IBCC meeting. It was the best one you've probably ever had. I will say, just from my perspective before he jumps in, that the IBCC is actually picking up momentum, and then a lot of that's due to Ken's efforts. He's been able to achieve what certainly I wasn't able to achieve, and that's to get the IBCC to really get some traction. So with that, anything you want to add to your report from last time, Ken?
I spelled Amy's name wrong, I apologize.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, I know, I'm sure she did. Okay, with that, let's talk about the task force. Jackie gave us a brief overview of not very much because we don't know a lot about the task force, but you know that the legislation passed a bill saying that they would create a task force to consider ways for Colorado to prepare for compact compliance, and that includes acquisition of water rights and actually a whole bunch of stuff. I'm going to stop because I'd really prefer that Jackie update us from here. So Jackie, you want to jump in? Or maybe she doesn't want to jump in.
She's still online.
Real quick, you mentioned.
I do. I was just walking
Sorry.
around pacing, so I didn't have to sit in front of my computer in a dark room. Yeah, so my,
You'll mind a second. I think there's a procedural question about what we're gonna do. Go ahead,
Okay.
Chris.
Never received an email, so maybe I'll check my spam folder or something. You sent it, Ken? Yes.
Is this from June 10th? Is that around the time?
Yeah, right after the meeting was on the 8th.
It should have been
Okay.
sent through the.
We'll double check to make sure that that's when Kate.
Right, okay. Actually, it might have came from, MailChimp.
I think it's in the packet.
Yeah,
Jackie, go ahead.
Jackie, hit it.
all right. So I was appointed to the task force by Representative Lynch out of the Fort Collins area. He called and asked me if I would serve. I said yes. I'm the industrial representative, representing my employer, Tri-State Generation and Transmission, because we have water rights on the West Slope and operate Craig Station. So that happened. You all probably saw the Colorado Sun article that named all of my fellow colleagues who will be participating as well. And after that, we have not been updated on when our first meeting is. So I imagine that that will probably happen next week, given the time frame laid out in the legislation that was passed and signed by the governor. It cited July 15th as being the deadline for a facilitator. I'm assuming that facilitator is probably going to be the one arranging the meetings, et cetera. So we'll have 12 meetings between now and December 15th and a report out. That's all I have. That's all I know. I really know nothing else.
Would you give us just your idea though, Jackie, of what the mission is and what would be the great outcome of the task force?
In my opinion,
That's good enough.
well, I mean, that's a little bit putting me on the spot. I think you know that. And, I think the best opportunity as of now that we have with this task force is to make sure that all the members are on the same page with the body of knowledge that exists on the demand management work that has been done mainly by people like you guys and some of you in the room across the state that participated in the various subcommittees. The River District had a demand management task force. I can't remember what the label was. I don't know if it was a task force or a subcommittee or advisory committee or something. And there's been a lot of time and effort spent on demand management itself. So we need to make sure that that is understood, I think, by all the members and how they can access that just for background information. And then, I imagine that we'll have some pretty in-depth conversations about where we're at in the Colorado River negotiation, what we need to do as members of the upper basin between now and the end of 2025, and then what is to be expected as far as process-wise for for the interim guidelines renegotiation as well, post 2026. And that's where I personally would start, is just making sure everybody has access and a baseline that we can all agree on, that is truth, that is fact. And then we go from there on. I would like to see the task force determine what it wants to tackle, how it wants to tackle these meetings. I imagine that people have different ideas that maybe, haven't been daylighted, or, things that hopefully they have learned from their various positions in the state, ag people working with ag people, myself being knowledgeable on industrial, water and the transitions that are taking place across the state out of fossil fuels, and municipal updates. And I don't want to assume what proposed solutions will come up with, because I have no idea. But I think the most important thing is to get everybody on the same page and have respectful communication that can hopefully unite the state around what we're looking at with water use, Colorado River water use, especially in the coming, you guys have heard me say this before, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. What do we want the state to look like and how can we get there? And I feel a little bit like a broken record. Mike's not in the room, but no one from agriculture has come to me and said, Jackie, I need a demand management program. That's the future of operations in my valley or my personal family operation. And so maybe we can have those conversations too, is what is the desire for a program that might look like demand management, even if it's not as written in the DCP. And then what other ideas are out there, and we certainly need unity. So hopefully we can get there. We'll just have to see how that works.
Okay,
Hey, Jeff?
all right, thanks for that. Questions for Jackie? Yeah, Tom,
No questions. I was
comment on the task force.
I was gonna say, I think Zane with River District was planning on giving a little on this subject as well.
All right, he's up next or right after Steve, I think.
Okay.
Good deal. I think that's it, unless there are other questions or comments on this part of the task force discussion. Then appearing, I will hand it over to Mr. Hinklemeyer.
I'm back, so. Yeah, but Steve, I guess you're paying attention to the agenda running on. It is next.
Patrick, can you put my presentation up?
10 minutes.
Okay, 9.5.
Not that we've timed you.
It'll be like Jeff Big River Committee.
Set my timer beside you.
So anyway, at the last meeting that we had in May, Jeff over there, where you guys talked about kind of an accounting change in it. It kind of took me by surprise a little bit. So, I wanted to talk a little bit about what changes they made. They weren't really guideline changes so much as accounting changes. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. Can you go to the next slide, Patrick? So I want to talk about the change in the CWCB 2023 grant cycles with a revised grant summary sheet. I want to talk about the new 2024 grant cycle. I want to talk about the preliminary grant funding, or just show you where we're at, given what we've already approved earlier this year. And then, Al, I wasn't sure exactly how we left that Coal Creek Mesa measuring device, but they were not able to come to this meeting, so we want to continue to table that.
Carry it over.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So go ahead, Patrick, to the next one. Oh, boy, okay. I can't read that, which is why I have my presentation up. So in past years, the CWCB doesn't count money coming out of our Yampa-White-Green Basin account until the project gets approved at the CWCB meeting. So the totals that I've been running with were the last, the grants that we voted on in January of this year got approved at the CWCB meeting in May. So I wasn't counting the grants that were approved in March of this year by our roundtable that are being talked about and hopefully approved next week, nor the grants that were in our May meeting that we approved. That will be talked about in September. But the new accounting change that they're making is that whatever funds are in our account on July 1st, plus the Yampa-White-Green Basin grants that were approved at our meetings, but have yet to be decided by the CWCB in July and September. So they're adding those in. So now knowing that, our new balance with that almost $230 some thousand of additional spending in our 2023 grant cycle, we will have spent over $1 million in our 2023 grant cycle. And our new account balance, the way that this new accounting is defining what's going on, is going to be 173,588 after the September CWCB meeting. And then that's where they're gonna vote on how much money we get for next year. And then, like Jeff said, they're gonna fund it in early October. So our new account balance, instead of the 400 and some thousand that we were showing earlier, is now showing that we're going to be at 173,000 and change. Any questions on that? Go to the next slide, Patrick. So our first two, on our website, our first two grant cycles that we said were 2024 cycle 1 and 2024 cycle 2 really end up in our 2023 grant summaries. So we haven't started our grant cycle yet. So our grant cycle, as far as we're concerned, our first cycle will start in October and get approved with a grant meeting, get approved hopefully at our BRT meeting in November, and then goes to the March CWCB meeting. So you can see over there where like July and September, those are now pushed back. And our 4 cycles are going to be October, November with approval in March, December and January with approval in May, February and March with approval in July, and April and May with approval in September. So we thought we had done our first two cycles for 2024. We haven't done any of them yet, according to the new accounting group. So we're gonna have to change our website, and I'm gonna have to change the guidelines, and I'll bring that probably to the next meeting so people can see what those revised guidelines are. Go ahead, Patrick. And then I just wanted to show you, so we had previously approved $400,000 for our 2024 grant program. So beginning with the $173,000 that we're gonna have at the end of, after the CWCB meeting in September, in theory, CWCB is gonna add $300,000 to our account, maybe more, but that's because we're below that 450 threshold. We're at least, hopefully we'll get the 300,000. That puts us about 473,000 with the pre-approved, and I think we did that in March, I believe. The 400,000, that would leave us a balance come next October 1st of about $73,588. So that's the way I'm going to leave it at this point in time. We'll figure out how much it is that we're going to get in early October. Our first grant cycle is going to be our first meeting will be the second Wednesday of October for the grants, and then we'll bring those to the November. So if we need to change that amount based on whatever the CWCB gives us in October, then we'll come at that time with a new recommendation. Otherwise, we're just going to stick with that for now.
Makes sense.
Patrick, one more slide, and then I just have a slide on that we wanted to continue to table that. And the last slide. So that's all I have. Do you have anything to add to that, Jeff? Did I miss anything?
No, you didn't miss anything. That kind of matches what I'm tracking here. Just want to apologize. You're probably the only basin that's that thorough in terms of your grant year. And I've always appreciated, you tracking probably a little bit better than we do. Our intention was to allow all of the roundtables to give kind of as much runtime as we could. based on the special infusion that happened in October, we kind of expected that roundtables might find it challenging to spend, over $500,000 in just a few months. And with, every roundtable's meeting schedule being kind of every other month, some meet quarterly, we wanted to just kind of give every roundtable the greatest opportunity to spend as much of their basic account as they could so that they could, get that full allocation. Didn't, when we made that change in September to include July and September CWCD board meetings, didn't realize it was going to create so much work for you, so we could apologize for that. I think in the long run, it'll help out, as you try to spend money and get back your full annual allocation, but I didn't realize it was going to cost so much work for you. Apologize for that.
No problem. Steve? Yes. Can we get a plaque for Steven? I think, I'm serious.
Makes my job a lot easier, that's for sure.
Yes, we do. Thank you very much for your work on this.
You guys put in
It's a
a lot
lot.
of time. Yeah.
He's made it his own.
So that's the end of the update. If there's any other questions, we'll take them. Otherwise, I'm done.
Thank you, Steve.
Tonight, we're not gonna let you go.
No. So, Mr. Kessler, that brings us up to your update that you have. Are you still with us?
I sure am.
Thank you for hanging out with us tonight.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. I appreciate your apologizing for me early, Alden, but I do want to apologize again. I had hoped to be there in person tonight. We do appreciate the opportunity to provide an update on the agenda, and unfortunately, I'm on duty for a 3-year-old at my house tonight. And luckily, I have a sitter for another 45 minutes or an hour. So, but I do appreciate you all having me. Appreciate Rebecca being there in person. I was asked to come tonight to give a bit of a, we'll call it a post-mortem on the legislative session. And before I dive into that, I want to introduce myself to those of you in the room that I don't know. I think I know most of you, certainly know most of the folks online, but my name is Zane Kessler. I am the Director of Government Relations for the Colorado River District. And in that capacity, I do try to manage most of our outreach to local and county governments within our district. I also manage our state and federal affairs work. And so spend a good amount of time down at the legislature each legislative session. And that was what I was preparing to talk about tonight, although I'll try to be quick so that if there are other topics we need to talk about, I'll try to preserve some space for that. But with that, Mr. Chair, if it's okay with you, I'll just dive in.
Have at her, bud.
All right. Well, the first regular session of Colorado's, I think it was their 74th General Assembly, adjourned on May 8th. And while there was a lot of big talk about water bills this year, there were fewer actual bills than expected. And in fact, there were just fewer overall bills this session than we've seen in previous sessions. That did not stop both chambers from working late into the night on the final day of their 120th or 120-day session. So they decided to keep those of us in the lobby core waiting on pins and needles. I do want to remind the roundtable members and those in the audience tonight that the River District Board of Directors holds bi-weekly legislative meetings throughout the legislative session where they take input from partners and water users within the district. We engage in a pretty robust conversation about potential legislation and legislation that's been introduced. And the board does take positions on all of the bills that I'm charged with lobbying down at the Capitol. I say that because we've been really trying over the last year or two, trying to encourage public participation in those meetings. They're held every other week during the session. We do hold some legislative updates during the interim, but the bulk of that work occurs during the 120-day legislative session between January and May. If any of you would like to sign up for our email distribution list, I'm going to drop in the chat right now. The information, you can email Stephanie Moore in our office. Her email's there in the chat. But if you'd like to be added to the legislative updates that our staff provides to the board and to members of the public, or if you would like to be notified about those legislative biweekly meetings, please email Stephanie with your contact info. I think we as staff, and I don't mean to speak for my board, but I believe our board makes the best decisions when we're well informed by our constituents and our water users in the district. So with that said, again, there wasn't a lot of water action at the legislature this year. There was the bill, Senate Bill 23-270, which was the stream restoration bill that a number of folks have been made aware of, both prior to and throughout the session. It was a priority bill for the Department of Natural Resources. It underwent extensive amendments to narrow its focus and reach before it was finally passed. Those amendments that narrowed its focus and reach, I believe, were generally a point of consensus between the proponents and the critics of the bill, and they were adopted nearly unanimously after the amendments were offered. As stands and as enacted into law, Senate Bill 270 provides that a stream restoration project designed and constructed within a natural stream system that is limited to certain minor stream activities or has obtained permits and is under construction by, I believe it was August 1st, 2023, does not cause material injury. So we've established that minor stream restoration activities are non-injurious. I think that's a step in the right direction. It's not nearly as big as some of the proponents had hoped, but as we've seen over the years, sometimes on these types of issues, we've got to take baby steps. And I expect that the Department of Natural Resources will be back next year with some offerings to build upon that Senate Bill 270 this last year. Here in the main stem, the Eagle River Water and Sanitation District brought Senate Bill 150, which requires the labeling of disposable wipes. This has become a problem and a bigger problem since the COVID-19 pandemic, where wipes that are not flushable, despite many misleading statements on their packaging to the contrary, have led to pipe blockages and financial burdens that are often heavier on rural utilities and rural water treatment facilities. So the board of the River District supported that bill that was brought by Eagle River Water and Sanitation. Again, it sailed through the legislature without much objection. There were some new restrictions on HOA communities related to water-wise landscaping. HOAs can no longer prohibit an individual property owner from using xeriscape or non-vegetative turf grass or drought-tolerant vegetative landscaping. That was, again, pretty non-controversial and kind of builds on some of the, I would say, front range focused water conservation legislation that we've seen in recent years. But the River District supported that bill as well, largely because, we all have to use less water in some way, shape, or form, and cutting out turf grass and finding ways to be a little bit smarter with our local landscaping is something I think we can all agree on throughout the state. So there were a number of property tax bills at the end of the session, as well as some more controversial bills related to affordable housing, land use, and local housing growth restrictions. I don't know that those are as relevant to this group, but I'm happy to chat about those if you'd like. with that being said, I'd like to reserve the lion's share of my talking time for the drought task force, because I think that Senate Bill 295, which created the drought task force, has been the subject of some perceived or real controversy. I think there's been some misunderstanding about what this task force is intended to do, and specifically how it came about. So the River District was involved in the creation of the Colorado River Drought Task Force. Our board supported that for reasons that I can get into in a minute. But first, I'd like to spell out what the bill actually requires. And it establishes the task force to specifically develop recommendations, although the task force is not required to make legislative recommendations, that they are asked to come back with recommendations for legislation that provide additional tools for the Colorado Water Conservation Board to collaborate with the 2 West Slope conservation districts and other relevant stakeholders in the development of programs that address drought in the Colorado River Basin. It also implicates some of the interstate commitments related to the Colorado River and its tributaries through conservation programs, be that demand reduction, demand management, so on and so forth. But I think to Jackie's point earlier, and I will say, I think this roundtable and the Yampa-White-Green Basin is well represented, probably better represented than any other basin or sub-basin in the state, in that you've got a couple of representatives on this task force. I was very glad to see that Jackie and Mike Camblin will both be serving. It's my hope that they will bring a level of understanding and expertise to the discussions that is going to be needed. But that said, I want to highlight reiterate something that Jackie kind of alluded to, and that this isn't a first step. It's a continuation of a conversation that's been going on for more than a decade. The River District fought hard to ensure that any recommendations by the task force, and we secured amendments to the bill requiring that any recommendations by the task force be consistent with some of the, let's call them landmark or foundational agreements around demand management that have occurred over the last 10, 15 years. And that includes the 2018 demand management policy statement by the CWCB. It includes any recommendations must be consistent with the IBCC's conceptual framework, as well as the Upper Basin Drought Contingency Plan's demand management storage agreement. So that being said, I think the River District's board supported Senate Bill 295 in large part due to our sincere belief that if our state and our regional water conservation districts work together on these issues, the people of the state of Colorado and our constituents in the district will benefit. Unfortunately, there were some developments during the session that made that challenging. I'll just say there was draft legislation circulated by the executive branch that proposed the establishment of a state-run program to acquire unspecified water rights within the Colorado River Basin and its tributaries for a quote water security reserve. That draft bill also proposed to amend the state's beneficial use statute to include as a recognized beneficial use, quote, the acquisition of water by the state of Colorado for purposes of increasing Colorado's water security in the Colorado River and its tributaries in Colorado to meet interstate obligations. That draft bill was of great concern to my board at the River District and to others. And it occurred at the same time. And I say this all not to out anybody or point fingers, but to reiterate that none of this occurs in a vacuum. And this session, there were a number of very difficult conversations occurring in parallel. And so that bill caused us some concern. And I think my board was appropriately concerned and opposed to that legislative proposal. as it appeared to authorize the permanent acquisition of West Slope water rights by the state in order to meet interstate obligations, while simultaneously or potentially creating a pool of pre-compact West Slope water for the purposes of potentially augmenting junior rights, including Trans Mountain diversions. So I don't want to harp on that too much, but it was one of the driving forces that led to the creation of the task force. The other driving force was a proposal that was originally brought forward by the NGO community or the environmental nonprofit community, that did work. We worked with them to try to negotiate a greater level of cooperation between the state and the river districts or the conservation districts. I guess my professional opinion is that NGO-led bill was a step better than the other draft that we had seen, but neither of them secured any level of meaningful support within the water user community, or certainly by my board of directors. So the task force is the result of those conversations, and that's not unusual. Oftentimes we hit roadblocks at the state capitol and we reach an impasse on something, and we try to find ways to keep the conversation going in the interim. And this task force is charged with carrying that conversation forward. So it has been the subject of some criticism. Much of that criticism appears to be based in either a misunderstanding of the context out of which the bill was created, or just a misunderstanding of what the task force is actually charged with doing. I'll just run through a couple of specifics and then I'll wrap up. But I do want to highlight that the committee is not dominated by West Slope members. That's been a charge against it already in public. Out of the 17 seats, I think there are 7 seats expressly reserved for West Slope. There are seats for statewide agricultural and environmental NGOs. There's a seat for each of the Native American tribes. There are 2 seats for Front Range Water Conservancy districts, 1 for the Front Range Municipal Provider. I think Aurora was selected for that. And then there are voting seats for the Department of Natural Resources and the Department of Agriculture as well. So I will, I guess, wrap up by saying that the River District support for this bill is not an endorsement of demand management. It is a recognition that if a possible demand management program or another systematic water conservation program is to be authorized, funded, implemented in the Upper Basin, if that's to occur, our state's going to need to prepare the laws and regulations that protect our ag industry and our communities that depend on agricultural production, as well as many of the values that we share with the environmental community and elsewhere. Much of that is unpacked in the CWCB's 2018 demand management policy statement, and has been led by work with, as Jackie said, the work of many in the room tonight, and by the River District and others at the state and regional level on the West Slope. So again, it is not by any means a endorsement of demand management. I would say it is an attempt to bring folks together to say, if we are going to pursue any programs of this kind, then we've got to figure out ways that it is done collaboratively, and again, done consistent with those foundational agreements that I mentioned earlier. So with that, maybe I'll shut up and ask if there are any questions, and again, happy to unpack any other issues that I may be helpful with.
Anybody in the room? Online? See, there's somebody's got something in the chat box. Is that from Zane?
That was the note for Stephanie Moore's contact info if you'd like to be added to legislative updates, please email Stephanie.
I don't see anybody online.
I see one up there, that's what I was going.
Yeah.
There's one right there.
Check the chat.
Yeah, all right. That's it. Thank you, Zane.
Zane, I would just, this is Jeff, I would just say that we would be more than happy to implement demand management if we can get paid $1.2 billion for it. Annually.
On that topic, my comment, just a bit of, I make it in jest, but it is something we think about often. When you look at the amount of press coverage that lower basin proposal received, it's a good reminder of what we're up against. And you know, everybody from the front page of the LA Times to the New York Times and everything in between was talking about a deal to save the river has been reached. And I mean, kudos to them. Good job spinning it in the press. I'm glad to see that this roundtable and others are taking a closer look and understanding that's nothing more than an interim step to get us from now to the interim guidelines being renegotiated.
Thank you, Zane.
Thank you all.
Oh, we got a quick question, another question here. Hold on, Zane.
I'm not leaving.
Yeah.
Zane, we've spent a ton of time on the system conservation project and the SEIS, but the elephant in the middle of the room is the interim operation guideline renewal. And I would imagine that you and the other leadership of the district, that's a major priority. And what work are you doing? Is there some way our basin can stay plugged into that discussion and be aware of what some of your long-term strategies are so that we can better understand what you're thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to come back as many times as necessary to this roundtable and to the other two roundtables in the district to give updates on that. So I don't have the dates in front of me, but some dates have been set by the Bureau. The clock has officially begun ticking. The state, per usual, that is there. The state will be leading in that arena, but per our charge in statutes, we'll be advising and trying to support the state throughout that negotiation. I guess one thing I will say, just from some conversations I had today, relates to, well, what do we want out of this? And it's a negotiation. I don't think anybody knows exactly how it's going to go, or exactly what we're going to get. But per my comments earlier in the meeting, I think some level of more permanent reductions in use by the lower basin has to be sought. We've honed in on the lack of accounting for transit and evaporative losses in the lower basin that comes up to somewhere near 1.5 million acre feet a year in system losses. Now, that's a simple first step. If we can secure some sort of accounting for transit and evaporative loss in the lower basin through this negotiation, I would say that's a great start. There's certainly more that we'll need out of it, but we'll certainly be involved in, and I or Andy Mueller or our general counsel or others are happy to keep you all in the loop and aware of where things stand once the real negotiations begin.
Thank you, Zane. Thanks for your work.
If that's it, we'll move on.
I think Doug has.
Oh, yeah.
I just want to ask Zane a little question real quickly here. So, and I don't think we've done our due diligence on the accounting of the overuse of the lower basin during the last 20 years. So I don't know who's responsible for doing that, but somehow we need to come up with those numbers. I mean, if we're going to the courthouse, you know, at dawn or at 5 o'clock, we need to figure out our numbers. And I know the river district that we're all involved in, Director Gray, and so we need to have some more ammunition on the overuse of the lower basin during the surplus years. Thank you.
I appreciate that, Director Monger, and it's certainly something that we have looked hard at it. There's certainly more work to be done, and my guess is the UCRC and the state will be leading on that in the weeks and months to come.
Thank you.
I think that's it. We're moving on then. All right, thank you, folks. Thank you, Zane. Jenny. Thank you. Ken? Thank you. I didn't know if you were co-presenting or what. Yeah, I threw you both on there. It's good to see you guys here.
Yes,
Looking forward to hearing what you guys got going on.
Oh,
So,
maybe you died, can't.
putting on different hats. I just disappear in the winter, you know, skiing, it overcomes me.
Go skiing every day.
I was here last meeting too.
yes, you guys-
But yeah, Ken Bertrude's recreational rep, putting on a hat of the Friends of the Yampa, where I am the recreation education coordinator.
And I represent environmental programs at Friends of the Yampa. My name is Jenny Fritzen.
Yeah, and we're here to talk about the Outstanding Waters project that we have been working on since last August. Give you kind of the who, what, when, where, why, and how of it all. It's part of a outreach effort that we are required to do with regards to this Outstanding Waters designation. And we've talked to several of you in the room already, but wanted to come to the round table and explain what Outstanding Waters are. It's asking, have you asked a question? So on to the next. So yeah, we joined this in August of last year. It's a 3-year effort where we sample 8 times over the 3 years. We were with a group of stakeholders, such as the Roaring Fork Conservancy, the Pew Charitable Trust, American Whitewater, American Rivers, Western Resource Advocates, a whole suite of folks who have worked on this in the past. So in July of 2022, last year, the southwest corner of the state was designated over 500 river miles, 22 stream reaches of outstanding water, which is the highest water quality that we have in the state of Colorado. Who here likes good water quality? Obvious, right? So to the nuts and bolts of what we're doing. So what is an outstanding water? Basically, these are awarded to the state's streams, rivers, and creeks that have the highest water quality deemed by the state of Colorado. It's part of the Federal Clean Water Act, which created this in the 70s, and it asked all the states to administer it themselves. So we're working with the Water Quality Control Division and the Colorado Department of Health and the Environment. These are designated to protect existing water quality. So we have to prove that this high level of water quality exists first off by doing water sampling and doing efforts, and then the state can approve them and designate them as outstanding water. What it does, it protects these waterways from short-term degradation. It is not about water quantity, it is about water quality. It does not impact anything with regards to a water right. But if someone was to try to get a permit with the state of Colorado for a discharge permit specifically, they would have to prove that they did not deteriorate the stream in the long term. You can have short-term degradation of the stream. The intent is to designate it and preserve these high water qualities for future generations. Next, please. When are we doing this? We do this in the winter. We go out there and we have to sample, like we said, 4 times or once a quarter, basically, during winter, during peak runoff, post runoff, and then in the fall as well. We actually have 7 rounds over 2 years of water sampling to prove that the river, these river reaches have high water quality standards met. And then it goes through a rulemaking process with the Water Quality Control Commission and CDPHE. 3 public meetings. We've already done one of those this past November. And then in June 2024 is when the Water Quality Control Commission will review these and potentially designate them as outstanding waters. Why would we pursue outstanding waters? Why not, right? We want the highest water quality in the state. We want our creeks and rivers and streams to be high levels. It protects our forests, it protects our water, it protects our way of life. The overall health and resilience of the river. Our communities depend on high water quality. Protecting these in our forests as outstanding waters will provide us long-term development for all sorts of uses, river ranching uses. You know, we need high water quality in our systems.
So how does an outstanding waters designation, how does it actually protect water quality? Again, this is a water quality designation. It has nothing to do with water quantity and actually can't affect water quantity. It's written in such a way that it's only for quality. It protects streams if existing high water quality against future degradation of that water quality. And like Kent said, it's the highest level of protection under the Clean Water Act. There are 2 really concrete ways that a designation like this could protect a stream. The first one is for CDPHE issued permits for point source dischargers. There would be additional conditions that would have to be met that would be written into that permit to preserve or protect the high water quality that's already there at that stream. The second is for anything done by the Army Corps of Engineers, that an Army Corps of Engineers issued permit would have, I think the CDPHE would add on water quality protections to that permit. You might say, well, why are you pursuing this for our designations are being sought in the Forest Service, so on public land, not private land. And I think the main reason that the main way that this could protect future water quality is just against these future, unknown future conditions, which is another layer of protection for these most pristine streams in our state that could protect against an uncertain future where we don't really know what the threats are going to be. Next one. And so what qualifies a reach for outstanding waters designation? There are 12 standards that have to be met or exceeded for water quality as determined by the CDPHE. When we go out and we test water, we are collecting information on dissolved oxygen, pH, E. coli, 2 different nutrient measurements. We're doing nitrate and ammonia, and then 7 different dissolved metals. In addition to the actual high water quality, we are collecting information that demonstrates that the candidate reaches that we're sampling have significant ecological or recreational value, and that they actually need protection beyond just the standard CDPHE water quality standards. So they have to have a demonstrated need, ecological or recreational significance, and the exceptionally high water quality. And so where are they? Well, they are on you at the 13 stream reaches that we are pursuing this designation for are all in Routt County on Forest Service land. So there's nothing on private land, and at this time there's nothing in Moffat County. We kind of divide them into 4 different site clusters. And I think this slide is showing. Was there one in front of this? This is the. All right, that's fine. Go back. So this one, these are 3 different areas where we're testing out in California Park. The red dot is our sampling site. It's a confluence of Elkhead Creek and First Creek. If those reaches were awarded the designation, then the upstream tributaries feeding into these creeks would be included in that designation. The next area is on the middle fork of the Little Snake River. We're sampling a lower section, kind of near the hiking trail entrance to King Solomon Falls, that hike. And then we're sampling 2 upstream locations on King Solomon Creek and the middle fork of the Little Snake River. And you can see that if those regions are awarded the designation, it's going to protect a lot of miles of stream in the national forest. And this section right down here on the Elk River, we're sampling on Hinman Creek, on the North Fork of the Elk, the Middle Fork of the Elk, and the South Fork of the Elk. You can see that our North Fork site is a little upstream. We had to sample upstream of Lost Dog Creek because that is on the 303D list right now, I believe, for arsenic or something. It's for a dissolved metal. And an outstanding waters designation cannot be awarded, I think, downstream of any 303D designation.
Jenny, before you go on, these already have outstanding water designations, these systems in the purple, that's in the wilderness. And you do see, we talk about, you know, we chose these locations in the forest up above instead of down here below, just to not impact the questions with public land or private landowners. There are some inholdings up in here, and this little side tributary goes through Columbine. So part of our outreach is going to be talking to them also. As well as, yeah, I think you mentioned.
And then we have one more set of, one more location on the next slide.
What is MF
Oh,
LS
this
bar?
one. Middle Fork, Little Snake River. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then our last set are like the steamboat sites, and we have a sampling site on Soda Creek, on Fish Creek, right at the intake for the water treatment plant, on Walton Creek, and then another secondary site on Storm King Creek. And I believe that is also because of some issue related to potential metals. I'm not sure if it's potential metals contamination, but basically Walton, Fish, and Soda. And of course, the Walton drainage is huge. I think it would have been ideal if we could have sampled further upstream to justify this gigantic potential designation, but just getting to it logistically is too complicated. It's pretty remote. But those are our 13 sampling sites. And I think we have one more, or I have one more slide maybe. Oh, commonly asked questions. And we can go on to the next. There's a list of commonly asked questions. Probably the most important, the one that's probably the foremost of everyone's mind is, does it affect water rights? And again, no, it's the designation is specifically such that it is only a water quality designation, not a water quantity designation.
Yeah, so pre-existing activities are allowed to continue, grazing specifically in the national forest, right? That comes to mind. That was a highly contested and questioned thing down in the Southwest when they got those 500 miles designated. Grazing still continues. It's a non-point source, right? It doesn't have, you don't have to get a permit, discharge permit to run grazing in the forest. So it can continue. We are looking to do outreach with some of the grazing permittees if they're willing to listen to us, just to explain to them what's going to happen. We've already met with the Forest Service and talked to them, because these are mostly all in the forest. These are all in the forest. The Forest Service is really going to be one who's going to be having to manage this in some ways. Let's say a future mine wants to be proposed in the Middle Fork of Little Snake. Then the Forest Service will have to work with the state to deal with it. And this is just all. If the Forest Service has to build a parking lot, you know, and they might have to get a discharge permit, then there'll be conditions for them to return the water back to this outstanding water. New long-term activities allowed near or along outstanding water resources, for sure. They're allowed. They're allowed to temporarily disrupt the outstanding water. You just have to return it back to its outstanding water quality.
Same thing with short term.
Yeah.
It just has to represent something, a strong benefit to the public good and be a short-term disruption only. They can go through private lands. The coalition that's working on this round of designations in Colorado is not pursuing any designations on private land. We are kind of looking for low-hanging fruit, just to extend existing outstanding waters that are in the wilderness areas, and other streams that we think have extremely high water quality that are in the Forest Service boundary. And The downstream water users, I would say, are only affected by having protections against for the excellent water quality they're currently receiving into the future.
They should only benefit.
Yeah, there should only be a benefit. Benefits on previously protected water bodies. Again, this is just another layer of protection. These streams that would earn a designation of outstanding waters already have exceptional water quality. We depend on them to make sure our drinking water is clean, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's just another layer of protection against a hotter, drier climate and uncertain future.
Yeah, and they're not wild and scenic rivers. This is not what that is. These are run by the state of Colorado, even though it's directed by the Federal Clean Water Act. State of Colorado manages this, so there's no federal anything with it. There's no water right with this. This is just if somebody needs to get a discharge permit, they have to put the water back to a high level above where they're designated.
You guys have any questions?
Why do you send more in the winter time?
Good question. So that's required by the state, so that we're getting base flows winter, peak flows, late summer flows, and then fall flows. And it's just to see if different flow regimes bring out the metals.
It's basically to keep more people from doing this because it's really hard.
We've used snowmobiles, we've used rangers, we've skied,
I thought it might be for personal enjoyment.
it was a lot of fun. In a twisted kind of way.
Maybe not a question, but just an acknowledgement. One of the sites is Fish Creek, which is the supply of over 90% of the water to city Steamboat Springs and its residents. And we like that creek and we're very protective of that creek. So when Jenny reached out to me, I had a number of questions and she was very diligent in giving me those answers. Number one, would there be any degradation to the water quality? No, there's only protection and benefit. Number two, how does it affect the water rights? There's no effect of the water rights, and you know, as much as we like this designation, I was also concerned about is there going to be more regulation, and that really isn't an impact from what I can tell so far, which is good. So I just want to give Kent and Jimmy kudos. This is a good program, and in my mind, it just further bolsters the protection of Fish Creek, which supplies water to supply everyone's needs. So thank you very much.
Can we come to you for a lot of support?
And it won't take an hour and a half to get there.
So a couple questions. What's the average length of these stretches? For some, give me an example.
That's a great stretch. We can go back to the slide with the.
So let's use Fish Creek for an example.
Yeah, they go the other one. So, you know, all we have to do is sample right there. And prove that the water quality there is high level and that there's also outstanding ecological and recreational resources upstream, such as cutthroat trout. Colorado River cutthroat is like one of the standards in some ways. So from here upstream would be designated as outstanding water.
As long as there's no other influence that someone could say, you can't lump it all in together because this is going on there. That whole reach upstream would be.
Yeah, you see.
4 miles.
Yeah, and Soda Creek is here, so just the north Soda, Middle Fork.
Next question, one of the biggest threats to our streams in this last few years, at least the last decade maybe, has been these catastrophic fires. So, and Fish Creek's a great example. If Fish Creek goes up in smoke, it's a lot of problems for not only Steamboat, but. So my question has to do with the interaction between what you're trying to do and the Forest Service policy on fire. Is there any conversation about that?
We had a long talk with the forest and and you know, maybe not only fires, but also climate change has come up. People are like, what happens if it gets hot? You know, your temperature is gonna impact water quality. But again, this impacts discharge points. So if the fire comes through, there's nothing the Forest Service is still gonna fight the fire, even though there's outstanding water. Doesn't.
Sometimes.
Right, I know, right.
You don't know.
No, you're right. I mean, but it's not, you know, like climate. The question is what happens with outstanding waters in the future if they get too hot? And that's a great question. I don't have an answer. Because we're not gonna be able to.
I need to tell you, the long term after a catastrophic fire is a lot of hot water.
Yeah.
Well, after, a decade, there's still all kinds of issues as far as that. My last question has to do with collaboration with water conservancy districts. If this is truly on national forest, do the adjacent water conservancy districts weigh in on this at all?
They can.
We've done lots of outreach. Andy Rossi at the Upper Yampa Water Conservancy District, he is well aware of this project. And I think they're called conditional water rights are like the only thing that they're potentially concerned about. But they are supportive of our efforts, and we have done a lot of outreach with them. At one point, we were looking, I believe, at Molson Creek, and we decided not to pursue that this year. That would maybe have been a little more contentious because there's potential to develop some more water storage up there.
The Great Northern Water Conservancy District goes right up in California Park.
So we should reach out to them. Yeah.
It's Doug.
Oh, good job, Doug. All right.
Chairman.
Okay.
We were 30 minutes overdue, so.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, and
Thank you.
so let's ask. I got two folks with their hands up. Those will be the final two.
It'll be real quick. Oh, go ahead.
All right, so is Tom. So, go ahead, Callie.
Forest, health treatments, harvesting. Is that still gonna be supported?
It's
in
still
these kind
can,
of
still can occur.
Locations,
Mhm.
what are they gonna have to go through?
So if they have to, if they build a road or build a bridge and they have to get a discharge permit through the state, the condition will say you can temporarily degrade the outstanding water, but you have to make sure it goes back to being an outstanding water.
And the Forest Service is motivated also to keep the water clean. I felt like they didn't feel like we were at odds. They felt like, and then they felt like we were kind of ultimately had the same goals.
Right.
Tom.
So the low hanging fruit was the sites that you picked with, mainly public land, forest land above. Is there plans to, once the low hanging fruit is picked, to move down?
Potentially, it goes on a 3-year cycle. So the Water Control Commission is looking at Northwest Colorado right now. It's basically above the Colorado River, west of the divide, so this corner of the state. And then several years from now, it'll come back to here. And if it worked and people are interested and maybe someone else wants to do it, anyone can apply for these. It just takes a lot of heart.
I guess just kind of like Frank said, I was thinking about regulation. If it moves down and it's in private land and you do some testing and you find that it's high in nitrates, does that mandate then from health department that some changes need to be made, even if it's not one source?
So if the water was running through private land downstream of the designation, there's nothing.
So if we were sampling, like right now we're sampling, if something were to come up and said high in nitrates or high in one of these, it wouldn't become an outstanding water.
So there's no regulation of waters that don't meet some quality.
Oh, you mean like if we find something bad, could something bad happen?
Yeah.
No, it just wouldn't get the
It
designation.
wouldn't get the designation.
Yeah. If any of the streams that we've selected don't have high enough water quality, they will be rejected by the Colorado Water Quality Control Commission.
Okay, we're gonna wrap it up there.
Please reach out if you want, Doug, we're gonna get your contact.
Please follow up.
Um,
Sounds like they're gonna be doing some outreach to Great Northern as well, so.
And I saw there was a document that was online. I don't think you can view it. I couldn't do that.
I shared it, but I think it was like something was wrong with it, and I
Yeah.
shared it again with Patrick.
It'll be updated in the meeting packet for.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. We do have the snow observatory. We're 30 minutes over. So, we're gonna jump right into it, and there is a request, as I understand, coming from Mr. Jeff Deans with the Airborne Snow Observatory. So, let's just kind of roll right into that discussion and we've had, I think this is the third time. We've had some, second time, whatever it is, but roll right into this. So. Jeff, I didn't see Jeff online. Did you?
I'm here. I'm digging up my slides here. Thanks, everybody.
We are
There we
behind,
go.
Jeff. Apologize for that, but
No problem. It actually worked out great because I'm traveling in California and had some travel issues. So the delay actually helped out a lot. So I'll try to keep things brief here. I've got Dave Gotchis on the line as well to speak to some of the runoff forecasting work that was done this year with ASO data. But I'll start with a brief overview, a very brief overview of what the program looks like and some results from our Colorado activities this year. And then I'll hand it off to Dave for a brief discussion, and then we'll wrap up with some specifics about a possible Yampa Basin program. So our current status quo of monitoring our mountain snow water reservoir it relies on a sparse number of stations, SNOTEL stations, to really serve as indices of how much snow is up there and will form the bulk of our annual runoff. We're trying with those stations to capture the dynamics of the mountain snowpack that looks like this in this image, an incredibly complex distribution of water across the landscape in the form of snow. This is an image from 2019 in the Elk Range looking towards Crested Butte and the Upper Gunnison River. You can see the incredible variability in snow depth across that watershed. And we're trying to capture that system, in this case with 2 SNOTEL sites, one of which actually isn't even in the basin that it's used to forecast for. It doesn't take much imagination to see that a couple of middle elevation forest clearings might struggle to represent the full diversity of snow accumulation in that watershed. I'll take it a step further and say that trying to capture or trying to characterize our mountain snowpack reservoir with this limited perspective represents an incredible vulnerability, even dealing with what we might consider normal snow years. And it only gets worse as we move out of conditions that we might consider normal. To put it succinctly, history is an increasingly poor guide to the present. Relying on a couple of snow stations and how they compare to the past 30 years is only going to serve us more and more poorly going forward as the system changes, as our climate changes with changes in precipitation and temperature, as we get dust on snow variability year to year, influencing how much solar energy goes into the snowpack, and as our watershed conditions change, primarily due to changes in our forests from wildfire or beetles. This vulnerability manifests primarily in terms of the accuracy of runoff forecasts. A couple examples here just to highlight some of that vulnerability. On the right is a table of April 1st forecasts from the River Forecast Center for the Lake Dillon Blue River system, and then the subsequent observed April through July inflow to the Dillon Reservoir. And you can see quite a variation in the percent difference between those, from single digit percentages to plus or minus 25 or 50%. And crucially, at decision time, when they're operating that reservoir, we don't know whether it's a 2% error year or a 56% error year. So much hedging and uncertainty has to accompany water management decision making. Another way to look at it is in the bottom left. This shows 2 different forecasts: the Bulletin 120 from California, which is akin to the NRCS statistical forecasts, and again, the California Nevada River Forecast Center showing the 10 and 90% exceedance ranges. This was a May 2017 forecast, and you can see of those 5 basins shown, the bottom 2 there, San Joaquin and Kings, the forecast ranges don't even overlap. So what are our managers in those basins to do in that circumstance? How can they make a decision under those widely disparate forecasts? So the uncertainty in our snowpack volume leads to uncertainty in runoff forecasts, leads to uncertainty in the application of water management practices and allocation of our administration of water rights. That is the motivation behind ASO, Airborne Snow Observatories. We move beyond the station measurements and measure the snowpack throughout the watershed at high resolution. We use a couple of instruments on a twin engine aircraft, a laser scanner or a LiDAR, and a spectrometer, which characterizes the reflectivity of the snowpack. And from those instruments, we get snow depth, snow water equivalent, and snow albedo, or the reflectivity, wall to wall throughout the watershed at high resolution, leaving no doubt how much snow is up there that can then provide a solid foundation on which to run our runoff models and our forecast models. We collect these data and turn our data products around the snow water equivalent depth and albedos around within 3 days of the flight. And these data feed directly into physical models of the snowpack and of the hydrology system. And Dave Gotchis will speak here in a few minutes towards some of the runoff modeling components. This program started as a NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory project and slowly grew in the state of Colorado. It's grown rapidly in California, where it's now an established part of the state water infrastructure. In Colorado, we've grown from a couple surveys and a couple random basins per year to a more established program, largely through the input and buy-in of local entities, as well as in the past few years, the Colorado Airborne Snow Measurement Stakeholder Group, which I'll speak to a little bit later. This year, we had over 20 surveys throughout the state in various basins, from the Dolores and Conejos in the south up through the central part of the state and into the Northern Front Range. You can see the list there. So the program has really grown as different agencies and entities and organizations see the value of the data and go and put it to work. A couple examples of what some of these data look like from the past year. In the Easton Taylor River, so Upper Gunnison, we flew twice this year, on April 1st and again on May 23rd. We measured 344,000 acre feet of water in the East River Basin on April 1st, down to 178,000 on May 23rd, and in the Taylor River from 207 down to 91,000 acre feet. Once we have this full basin perspective, we can aggregate that data in any number of ways. We can add it up into that single number of water equivalent. We can look at it by elevation. That's the plots on the left showing the April flights in blue and the May flights in red, and how that SWE volume is distributed by elevation through the watersheds. And we can look at elevation and aspect combined. That's the radial plots there showing the highest elevations at the center of each circle, lowest elevation around the edges, and then divvied up into different aspect bins around the compass rose. With 2 flights, we can look at where the snowpack has changed over that time period. That's the rightmost red plots showing melt out throughout the basin, although a little bit of accumulation in the East River at the highest elevations on the northerly facing slopes there. So this is a really unique perspective into the entirety of the snowpack in the watershed. One other thing we can do now with the program having been going for a number of years is start looking at changes over time, year to year. This year was a fairly big year, as we all know. The last big accumulation year was in 2019. And so the next couple of slides show the comparison in the East and Taylor rivers between 2023, the April 1st flight, and an April 7th flight in 2019. In the East River, at that time, at those 2 time periods, the SNOTEL stations in the basin were showing essentially the same number. but we measured 20,000, close to 30,000 acre feet difference between those two dates, and some important spatial differences as well. In 2023, the blue colors are showing that we have more snow this year down in the valley bottoms, and in 2019 we had more snow than this year on the middle elevation slopes. We can also see quite a lot of variation due to different avalanching and wind redistribution patterns. If we move over into the adjacent Taylor River Basin, in 2019 and 2023, we measured exactly the same snow water equivalent volume, 207,000 acre feet. But if we look at the snow tells on those two different dates, there's quite a bit of difference, suggesting that there would be a large difference in total basin volume between those two dates. So two adjacent basins, same dates, two different stories that the stations are telling us. So really highlighting the need for this spatial full basin perspective combined with the station data to really help us characterize the full watershed. In the Roaring Fork headwaters this year was our first flight, and helping a couple different water management scenarios in this system, from the Rudai Reservoir operations and a number of trans-mountain diversions down to the city of Aspen's and Snowmass, town of Snowmass water supplies that have no snowpack monitoring currently in those basins. So it's some interesting applications there this year. And especially of note was the heavy dust event that occurred on April 3rd this year. It seemed to hit the Roaring Fork particularly hard compared to other basins. I do wish we had flown the Yampa this year, because satellite data suggests that there was pretty substantial dust impacts in the Yampa as well, especially on the low elevation snowpacks. But here in the Roaring Fork, really strong impacts of dust on the snow albedo, reducing that reflectivity and strongly increasing the amount of solar radiation melting the snowpack. Some examples of what these data can look like. Here's snow depth over the Maroon Bells on April 11th, and then on May 28th. Those dark blue areas are 2 meters plus. They're actually quite a bit more than 2 meters in many spots. Those are our late season water supply. Those are what keep the stream flows up in late season, ensure that water is available for late season diversions, especially in the unregulated parts of the system. So knowing where and how much those deep snow patches are and how they vary year to year can really not only help water management, but help ensure assure the distribution of late season flow to irrigation operations, for example. Over in the Blue River, Lake Dillon, kind of some interesting results this year. Not nearly as much dust was in the Roaring Fork, which was surprising to me given their proximity of the basins and the relative kind of downwind flow from the Roaring Fork to the Blue River. So a little bit cleaner snowpack there. Looking in particular at this year compared to last year, very similar numbers on the SNOTEL stations, 4 stations in the Blue River Basin, but 33,000 acre feet greater snowpack this year than last year. So really there's a lot more to the story than the station network can tell us. And in combination, the two networks, the ASO program and the SNOTEL network, really help constrain our runoff forecast models going forward. And with that, I will hand it off to Dave to talk about how we got these data into the Wharf Hydro runoff forecasting system this past year.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Do you want to just continue to drive your slides?
Sure, I can. Yeah, just tell me next.
Just Jeff, I'm driving the slides actually here. This is Patrick at the meeting, and I uploaded your.
Oh.
Sorry. I'm up the upper south flat right now.
I took some slides out to try to save you guys some time, recognizing you're up against the end of the meeting. So we're on Dave's first Wharf Hydro slide now with a big black title bar through it.
Yep, there you go. That works just fine. Thank you. So you can go ahead to that next slide that had the bullets there. This slide, I'm not going to go through all of it for the sake of time, but it just summarizes there's sort of a large body of work that our group from the National Center for Atmospheric Research over in Boulder has been doing around the state since about 2008, 2009, looking at different measurements and modeling methods that are kind of more at the research forefront and trying to look at how those transition into operations. One of the key technologies that was experimented with starting in 2015 was this ASO remotely sent snowpack information that Jeff has just talked about. So there's a couple other bullets in there about how that happened and other types of information, but for the sake of time, we'll go ahead and move forward. One slide, please. And this slide just highlights our modeling system, some of the concepts and physics that are taking place within this computational model, and our data assimilation and prediction workflow over on the right-hand side. Again, as Jeff mentioned, this is a physics-based model where we really are trying to capture a lot of the details across the watershed, both spatially, temporally, and looking at the energy dynamics going into and out of the snowpack and how that results in melt and runoff. This is the WRF Hydro Forecast System, which some folks may have heard of. It's been used in a number of different applications around the world and is also run operationally on a much shorter time frame for flood prediction as the national water model for NOAA, the National Weather Service. And so we've taken a lot of the lessons learned from many of these operational applications, and we've started doing seasonal water supply forecasting with this tool going back to about 2015-16. Next slide, please. So here's the domain that Jeff showed earlier, looking at all the basins that were had ASO surveys in them, which are labeled here. There's several other basins which are being monitored for activity. And you can see there's somewhere in the order of 13, 14 different basins here where there's ASO data being surveyed from the aircraft. We were taking that data and ingesting it or assimilating into the model in real time. You can see the full model domain in the upper right-hand corner. That is a picture of soil moisture that comes out of the model. It's just a snapshot in time there, but the coloring that you see there encapsulates the whole domain. So the Yampa system, in fact, already resides within our statewide domain, statewide meaning all the headwater areas. And so this is certainly of interest, and a lot of sort of prior work and leveraging can be done to brought the system up to operations within the Yampa region. Next slide, please. And so now we're going to look at some examples of what's coming out of the model. The animation you see in the lower left-hand corner is an animation of weekly snowpack across the state. And you can see all the different mountain ranges popping out. This goes from April 1st through June 30th. And the model here is operating on a 1 kilometer grid. So we're upscaling some of the ASO data where it is available and ingesting it into the model, and then letting the model run forward in time. And then generating forecasts all the way out through the end of the water year through the sampling of historical climate data to drive this model. And so that's what you see in the upper right-hand corner then are basin average traces of snow water equivalent, both from the analyses of the model as well as the forecasts, which are the dotted lines. And looking at the dynamics coming out of the peak. So we start running these forecasts in about late March to early April, and we're still running them to this day. And we're tracking the impact of ASO by running the model with and without the ASO survey data coming in. Next slide. Similarly, as we showed earlier, the model's keeping track of a number of different hydrologic variables. We're very interested in following the dynamics of soil moisture, of both antecedent conditions from the prior autumn and winter, and then of course leading through the melt season and now into the dry down season in which we're at. And so this is another example from the Taylor River Basin, as Jeff mentioned earlier, where you can see the soil moisture in a basin average sense, get some peaking in the fall, you get some late rains, you get some snow that melts, you get a little uptick, and then things pretty much flatline for the winter. And then the big ramp up with a lot of diurnal pulsing going on during the melt season as the snowpack ablates throughout the springtime. Next slide. And then of course the flagship product from the modeling system is the forecasts of river flow or reservoir inflows coming out of the model. So this again is an example from Lake Dillon and the Blue River system. And those are ensemble stream flow prediction traces that come out of a number of different forecasts throughout the year. We create probability intervals for those, and we of course have these run with and without the ASO data. That first ASO flight is really nice to get right near the peak snowpack conditions. That kind of encapsulates and corrects for any errors in the wintertime accumulation of snow. And then later in the melt season, when we get a lot more dynamics going on with ablation or potentially some rain on snow or high elevation snow events, then a late season snowpack survey from ASO helps correct for that. Next slide. And those are just snapshots of these kinds of plots from a number of locations throughout the state. I won't go into all those, but just showing you that each one of these basins we had outlined this year, we can extract these kinds of forecasts from. Next slide. And this is just a deep dive now, again, for the Blue River system, kind of putting all of those pieces together. So in the lower left corner, you see the 1 kilometer animation of snow, and right there where it gets very pixelated is where we're ingesting the ASO data. And really what that's capturing is all of the variability in snowpack that comes through a lot of the snowpack dynamics that many of our models and many of our meteorological data sets can't really account for at this time. Of course, we can generate all those runoff forecasts, which you see in the upper left-hand corner, from all the different tributaries coming into, in this case, Lake Dillon, and seeing where we might have more or less snowpack from years before that are contributing to flow into the reservoir here. And the upper right-hand corner, another basin averaged view of the snow water equivalent, looking at the dynamics throughout the entire water year and what the impact of the ASO assimilation on the forecasted snowpack conditions and snow depletion are. Going down to the bottom, this particular graphic then shows that our forecast this year without the ASO data was generating about 98,000 acre feet of inflow into Lake Dillon. And what we saw through a lot of the operational meteorological data sets that were available from the National Weather Service and other entities this year was a pretty significant underestimate of the amount of snow that was actually accumulating in the basin. And so when we got the ASO surveys, that bumped up our forecasts on June 1st to 137,000 acre feet. And right now, here we are mid-July, about to wrap up the April through July period. Looks like things are going to settle in at around 132,000 acre feet. So a marked improvement came through the use of ASO data this year. And for the Colorado domain in particular, this tended to be the case for this year due to some of the deficiencies in the meteorological data that we had, that ASO is able to help correct for those biases in real time. Next slide. That's just another example plot that we can skip for the sake of time right now. And so throughout the season, we were putting all these data together from all the different basins that you saw, which we were running the forecasts in, and generating a number of different reports. I think we generated on the order of about 10 to 12 different reports. This is an example of all those same products that you saw earlier, packaged up for the Dolores River Basin. The Dolores, of course, has a number of water management challenges, irrigation demands, reservoir operation demands, habitat supply, and then on down across the state line as well. And so providing this kind of information in a sort of very rapidly updating sequence and being corrected as many times as possible with ASO surveys has provided the folks in this basin and many of the other basins a lot of additional information to what they have available, not just on what a reservoir flow cast would be, but really how much snowpack is in the basin, how we think it's going to be melting out in terms of timing, early versus late season partitioning, what some of the impact of the big spring storms might be, and so on and so forth. So I believe that's it for my part as well. You can go ahead and advance, and I think it's going to go back to Jeff for a slide to wrap up. And yeah, look forward to questions later.
I'll wrap up with this slide, and that is that we've started leveraging some statewide program funds from water plan grants and CWCB projects bill to lay the groundwork for a Yampa Basin program. We collected the snow-free baseline data in the upper Yampa above Steamboat and Elk River above Milner last year. are working with a bunch of different entities in the basin to try to put a program together going forward. So I think I'll leave it there. I recognize that we're well over time tonight. I've put some notes in the chat for some website resources for the statewide stakeholder-led program, as well as ASO's website and my and Dave's emails for further outreach. Ken, did you have a note to wrap up here?
Yeah, are you all done, Jeff?
Yeah.
And David, thank you very much for your presentation. One of the main reasons that I wanted to have this presentation, I'm sorry it's so late at night, because I know you all feel just like me in water meeting since 9 this morning. We need to, do you want to move forward with this? What they just showed you was a map of the area that they already have the snow off flight. So we have the ground, the baseline that you have to fly these in the winter, to be able to collect this data. Is this data that we want to see collected in Northwest Colorado? Do we collectively see value in this? Is this something that we should be pursuing and see if we can find supporting agencies and like cities and counties and conservancy districts? We need to try to identify a fiscal agent. Should we be applying for the grant funds? If there was a 6-week window of federal money of well over $10 million this spring, we didn't even apply for it, but there are funds to support this. This doesn't even talk about the Colorado River Compact. The fact that the long-term solution, the next 20-year interim operation guidelines, they have to rely pretty heavily on how much snow we actually receive. If we drain those reservoirs again, that's all we will have is what lands on the ground. This would be a much better expenditure for the Bureau of Reclamation's $12 billion they're sitting on than giving it to a bunch of farmers down in Arizona that are going to try to do a little better job of managing their water. Literally, that 1.2 billion could pay the better part of 20 years of collecting this data all over the upper basin. So my question of you, and what I'm trying to get a quick poll on you, is this a good thing that we should pursue? Is this a loser and we don't want to waste any more time on it? Or are you still trying to figure that out? That's what I'm asking you.
We wrote a letter of support in November of 2021 for them to work on this project.
And they received a bunch of money, and one of the things they did was they came back and they flew our baseline.
Yeah.
So then conceptually, I love this. I mean, not just conceptually, but I mean, concrete what it is. I think it's fantastic. I think it's something that Brown County would be very interested in. Probably mostly the emergency management department, flooding questions. But I will also tell you that it's 9:15 and I'm completely fried. And in order to really, enthusiastically thumbs up and endorse, I would need a lot more detail about what is the actual ask. Are we going to have more money or just to look for money or whatever? I mean, I think it's great, but to be honest with you, I don't have the bandwidth to hash out details or even talk about next steps.
You gave me what I wanted, which was a thumbs up. That's what I wanted to do. I just need some kind of indication, so don't be bashful, just, okay, I see a thumbs up. Thumb up,
Absolutely.
thumbs up. Because this is not just water users, or what reservoir managers. It's every rancher and farmer in the valley, every property owner, I think, that has some interest in knowing what's going on collectively in our basin. So, Tom, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I think the biggest, and I agree with you, Sonia, a little bit late for you to figure out how you support this, pulling out to the sites. There's been quite a bit of talk within the lower and upper basin, this contract we have of overuse in the lower basin, of not setting those contracts for releases out of the reservoirs based on reservoir level, but based on hydrology.
Correct.
And so we need to support this so that we're not letting water out of reservoirs when we have the snow in the mountains. And so I'm.
Absolutely agree. Is there anybody in here that says that this is a loser, we don't want to waste any more time? Oh, okay, so we'll do some. If you have any other ideas or thoughts you want to share with me, I realize it's too late at night to get started on this. But get back to me, not that hard to find. And we'll work on this collectively here in the basin and see if we come back, try to schedule it at 9 o'clock at night. And see if we can come up with a better idea about how to, what are those next steps we need to pursue to move this program forward. I can tell you, the Water Conservation Board is like, scale this, we want to fly the whole state, how quick can you do that? They're like, we can't do it right away, it's gonna take a few more years. But they are flying the entire state of California 4 times a year, so I mean, they are doing some work. Thank you. The same group. The same group.
Announcements, I don't think we have any announcements unless somebody has one they would like to bring to the group. Just Callie has 2.
Just real quick, the location of the CWCB board meeting changed. It's at the Elevation Hotel in Crested View, not at the location in Delta.
Okay. Callie, you have a
So
couple.
the White River Conservation District's Natural Resource Tour will be August 26th, which is a Saturday. And so watch your emails for invite. And also we have a forest program coordinator position open. If you know of anybody interested, please let me know.
Have a good evening, everyone. I move we adjourn.
Adjourn. Start this an hour earlier next time.